Hello there, Nick Zook with nickzook.art. And in this series, what I'm going to teach you is how can we use ZBrush as a modeling tool and do high resolution sculpts, but bring that work into Unreal and render that in real time, but then also generate like really nice high resolution screenshots. So with this series, I also want to teach you about the concepts of modularity, how we can reuse parts over and over to build all different kinds of combinations. So we're going to take a look at that. First, we're going to start off in Maya. We're going to be doing some blockout meshes inside of Maya. So we're going to do some very simple modeling. So if you've never done any of this, my goal is that I could teach you from the ground up, from having no experience in Maya, ZBrush, and Unreal. And I'll show you everything I know right now to be able to get you to this place where you could build something similar to what I have here. So we're going to do some simple modeling in Maya. We're going to do the blockout meshes there. We're going to be able to send those meshes over to ZBrush. And then I'm going to show you some tools and techniques to be able to sculpt stone and try to do something convincing with your high resolution sculpts. I'll teach you a little bit about decimation master. So we're going to decimate our models, get that down to a reasonable polygon count that still has a nice quality to it. We'll send that over to Unreal. We'll use Nanite as a method of being able to render our geometry within there. So we get something that looks like our high resolution sculpt from ZBrush. Not a whole lot of work to get it in there. And so we'll get a nice high quality look from that. I'll teach you a little bit about lighting and how we can set up some lighting. We'll take a look at some very simple blueprinting inside of Unreal so we can get some motion and components moving. We'll also take a look at doing some basic lighting setup so you can get an understanding of that, doing lighting and atmosphere together. And then I'm going to show you how we can do high resolution screenshots inside of Unreal. We'll also take a look at sequencer so we can do camera movements throughout the world. But then we'll look at movie render queue so we can actually take the results of that and we can render it out and have something nice for our portfolio. So if you're interested in this, come follow along with me and let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and grab the Unreal Engine and download that. If you already have it, then you can go ahead and skip this part. I am going to be using, at the time of this recording, Unreal Engine 5.6. So if you don't have that version, you might as well update to that current version that we have. And if you're watching this sometime in the future, then you'll have a much more advanced version of the Unreal Engine, and you should be able to do everything that we're taking a look at here. So I'm just going to the Unreal Engine, and you can go just do a search for Unreal Engine. Should be able to find this page very easily. If you want, you can go and click this download, at least at the time of this right here. And then this is actually going to give you their launcher that they have. So the launcher is going to come up and you should see something that feels very similar to this. Again, depending on whenever you're taking a look at this recording, this could be quite a bit different. But if I go to the Unreal Engine and I go click here, go to library, if this is your first time, there's probably only one version of the engine there. There might not be any. You can go ahead and click this plus button and it will go ahead and let you pick the version of the engine that you want. So you can actually go back quite a bit further if you want to do that. I've already got these downloaded, but you would be able to choose at least 5.6 as your version of the engine that you want, and then you need to go ahead and let it install. It is going to take a good chunk of time to install that. It's got to pull everything down, but once that's done, then we can go right here to this launch. So I'm going to give you just a second. Go ahead and grab that. So once you've got that installed, go ahead and make sure it's on 5.6. Go ahead and click launch, and it should go ahead and open the engine for you at that point. What I'm going to show you is that we're going to create a third-person template together. And from there, we're going to be able to steal the mannequin that they have within here. And that'll give us a nice starting point, something that we can put inside of Maya, and we can use that as a scale reference. So you can see that it's going to load up this Unreal Projects browser. We're going to go ahead and use games for this right here. They've got quite a few different templates on there. And like I was saying, the template that we're going to use is this third-person template. Go ahead and click on that. You're going to be able to choose a location for where it's going to store your projects. Pretty typical is going to be in your documents area. And you can actually name this thing. So I'm just going to call this third person stone project. I'll just leave it stone, just because it doesn't really like if you have a really long name for some of this stuff on there. It didn't look like it wanted me to start this off with a number 3 as well, so you can go ahead and do that and go ahead and hit create, and that's going to make the project for you. And after creating that, it should load up and you should see something very similar to what we have here. You might want to just go ahead and hit play just to test everything out, and you should be able to run around. If you're used to a first-person shooter game, you can just do WASD to move around, spacebar to jump. And if you want to get out of there, you can go ahead and hit escape, and that'll bring you back out to where we're at. All right, so go ahead and test that out and make sure you have the engine running, and then we can start getting moving from there. Okay, we're going to be grabbing the mannequin, but before we do that, I just want to show you a little bit about navigation and how we can move around. So Unreal is pretty nice for moving around in this space. There's a lot of options for you. The first thing I'm going to show you is just using our mouse. So if you left mouse click, it's almost like driving a car in a way. So left mouse click and I push forward and back, and it's kind of like driving the car forward and backwards. Now, if I push left and right, it's almost like I'm turning my head while I'm doing that. And if we keep going like this, it's going to drive it forward, and I can push in a direction, and I can do that forward, and I can roll it backwards at the same time. Okay. So that's one way of getting to move around there. If you do a right click on the mouse and look around, it's like you're in the world and you're just looking up at the sky. You can look down left and right. So it's almost like your head is on a swivel, and you can just take a look around and check out what's going on in the environment right there like that. If you do middle mouse and drag, that will pan the camera around, so you can pan it left or right, and you can go up and down kind of like you're in an elevator very quickly. And if you do left and middle mouse button together, it's possible you can kind of drive that thing and move it around. So the other thing that I've done is just I don't know, I'm a little bit used to just holding down right click and left click at the same time. It doesn't really do anything different, but it feels a little bit more comfortable in my hands to be able to do that. So again, left mouse, middle, and then right, and you're gonna have to get used to kind of moving around within through here like that. So something else that will play a big part in how fast you're moving is this control right here for your camera speed. So if you drag this up, if your environment's really, really large, then this is going to have a huge effect on how fast you can move around. So it looked like the default for that is set to 1 now. And let's just go ahead and put this back down here. It's on 8 right now. So I'll put this at somewhere around 3. So that's a pretty good speed like that. And then I do want you to get a little bit comfortable with this. And then the next thing I'm going to show you is just how we can save some bookmarks for our cameras. So if I hit Control 1, that's going to save a bookmark for me. And if I just move around to a different spot, I can hit Control 2. And then I'll go over here, and this area looks kind of interesting to me, and I'll do Control 3. And then maybe this looks interesting, and I'll do Control 4. And let's go and we'll go up in the air and look down on everything. Kind of like this. Just push that there, and I'll do Control 5. So after you have these bookmarks saved, you can push it all the way up to 0. But I'll tap 1. Now I tap 2 on the keyboard, 3, 4, 5. And you can see those are all the bookmarks that I set for myself already. Why I like to do that right off the bat, I don't think I can kill myself on this level unless I take the character and I take that player start that we have there, and I'm just going to move it over and then push it up, and it should start me off on top of there. So let's play it from here, and if I jump off and I'm like, okay, I'm going forever, and this doesn't, I don't think this has a kill Z switch on there, which normally if you drop so far, you would just die, right? So if I hit escape to go out of here, now my camera is like way down here, and that could be problematic. So this has happened to me before. That's why I like to store these bookmarks like right off the bat. So now if I just tap 1, I can get back to here, 2, So those are bookmarked for me and I don't have to worry about if I jump off the world or die or something weird happens with my camera. I'll do this one more thing just to show you this. So I'll jump off again and I'll hit escape. And if you ever get stuck where you're like, I really don't know where I'm at in the world and something bad's happened, you can always select a mesh and you can tap F and that will frame in on that mesh. And then you can start moving your camera around. While I'm saying that, this would probably be a good time to tell you about the next way that you can move. So if I select this mesh, and if I tap F, it'll frame in on it. And if you're used to doing camera manipulation inside of Maya, you'll be familiar with this. So if I hold down Alt and I left mouse, it's going to rotate around the object. And if I hold down Alt, right click, that will zoom in and out. If I hold down Alt and middle mouse, that will pan. So this is the same camera controls that you would have inside of Maya. So for all you Maya users, you're going to be happy about that. And then that will give you another way of moving around within the scene. Okay. And then the last method that I'm going to show you is this. If you are used to doing a first-person shooter game, you can hold down the right mouse button. And at that point, you can use WASD to move around like you're used to. And then you can do E will take you up like you're in an elevator, and Q will take you down like that. And then you still are holding down right mouse button, so you're looking around with your head at that point. So it's kind of like you're flying around in the world, and you can get move around rather rapidly and very quickly. Okay. All right. So that's the different methods of movement. I do suggest that if you've never done this before, you really need to try these out. You need to give yourself about 15 minutes of trying this stuff out. Let your brain sink into this method of moving around the scene, because your ability as a 3D artist is going to heavily depend on your ability to move in the three-dimensional space. It doesn't matter if it's Maya, Blender, Unreal, ZBrush, you have to learn the navigation, okay? So spend some time with that, all right? And then the next thing that I'm going to show you is we're already there. We're going to take a look at the manipulator and be able to take a look at how we can transform things and move things around. So you can see up here, we've got just like Maya, we've got W, and then we got E for rotate, and then R for scale. And then the other thing is you can hit the space bar and you can cycle between these different manipulators at that point. So I'm just going to put it on the move tool. And you can see right now we've got snap to grid, and the increments are set to 10 right now. We've got rotation snapping is set on, and this is rotating and snapping to 10-degree increments. We've got scale snapping on, and that's set to 0.25. So you can come in here with the drop down and you can change the values of that. But this makes it really nice. Like if you know that you're snapping to the grid and you put this on something like a value of 100, you could easily move this thing around in the world and have accurate placement on there for that. And let's say I drag out a copy of this. So if you got it on the move manipulator and you hold down Alt, we can drag out a copy of this thing. And then every time I move this thing up, it's going to be moving 100 increments for us within the grid. So if you take a look over here, you can see some of the different values, and you can see this is at 500. It's color coded for you. So we got X, and then we got Y, and then we got Z right there like that. And so you see that's going up 100 units, another 100 units, just like that, right? So that makes it really easy for you to move around the parts and the pieces, and you can be accurate with it. If you need to just put it freeform, you can turn all these off just like that, and you got free motion to go ahead and scale, rotate, do everything you need to do for that. I'm going to hit undo to get that back on there like that. So I guess the other thing is, if you ever get in a situation where you do kind of mess things up and you want to get back to the default of the world here, you can just type in 0. I'm going to hit tab 0, 0. And then for my rotation, I'll do 0 for that as well. And then it looks like we've got the scale manipulator. So I'll put this at 11 by 11, and I'll just do a value of 1 for this. I'll tap the space bar to move it up and see what they've got going on here for this. If I like the ratios of this, I can actually lock this together. And then now if I scale it on any axes, it will actually keep those ratios together. So if I know that I want to put this at like 7, it'll keep this at 7.7, and then whatever that ratio was before, you can see it automatically figures out that number for us, which is pretty nice. So I've got my player start. I move that thing over there. I'm going to just put this back in the world. I'm going to go 0, 0, 0, like that. Oops, let's go 0. And I'm going to raise it up in the air. And some things, if they have collision on them, and we can talk about collision a little bit later, don't want to overwhelm you with that right now. But if we hit end, it will recognize the collision on the floor and it drops that part and lets it sit directly on the floor, which is pretty nice. So now we can hit play, and you can see I've changed the value of that so it's a little bit bigger, and we can click and we can just run around on there. Okay. So again, get familiar with being able to manipulate the parts in the world too. Have a little bit of fun with that. And like I was showing you, it is possible that you could take a piece like this. You can hold down Alt and you can just click and drag it out, and maybe you scale these things down. If you want non-uniform scaling, you take that off, and we can do something like this right here. Let's see if I hit end, it should drop it to the floor. So if I hold down Alt and click and drag out another copy, I'll just scale this down and make this a little bit smaller. I'll hit end on that one and hold down Alt, scale this in just a little bit within through there, and then hit end. And I was wanting to see if we could get our character to jump on this stuff. Okay, so I'll get it close enough. Maybe I won't be able to make this jump. We'll see. Actually, I'm going to cause a problem. I'm going to make sure I can't jump to it. So I'm going to get this out just far enough right there. We'll play it. We'll run and then jump. I actually did it. Okay, let's pretend I didn't make that jump. Let's say I just fell a little bit short, and boy, I really need to move that thing over just a little bit. The whole power of Unreal is you can jump in and out of the game. We can move this platform just a little bit closer for us. We can try that out again, and I should be able to get there. And can I jump all the way up here? No. So I do have a problem there. So I could just go ahead and push this down just a little bit like that, and then maybe push this one down here. Play it again. So this is where you're actually testing this. You're live. You're able to see if you can encounter problems. You fix the gameplay, and we are going to be talking about blocking and using blocking meshes. But that's basically what we're doing right now. We're testing on gameplay, and we're blocking out with different meshes, and we're able to see if this actually works for us. So this is a good little test. So maybe try something like that, and then when you get done, just kind of playing around for a little bit, maybe half an hour. You should know something about how to move around in the environment. You should know something about your manipulators, and you should know about being able to place some stuff in the world very simply, and running around in the environment that you're creating and manipulating and trying that out, and just get a feel for the engine that way. Okay? Okay, let's go ahead and get the mannequin outside of Unreal and pull it into Maya. But before we do, I want to explain something to you that's going on here. And that is that we chose the third-person template, but this is actually a game mode. I've got the world settings set up here, and normally you wouldn't see that. You can just go up here to Window and go to World Settings, and you can actually see some of this within through here. But you can see that this game mode is set to Blueprint third-person game, and if we hit this little icon here, anytime you see something in one of the menus, you can go ahead and navigate to the content browser, and it's going to take you exactly where that thing is. So you can see this is actually under content, and you go here, there's a third person, and then there's the blueprint area right there, and this is taking us to this third-person game mode. If we double-click on that and open that up, we can see some of the different parts and the components that make up this game mode that you have here. So I'm just going to pull this in just a little bit right here like that. But the thing that I wanted to show you is where this character is being pulled from this player start that we have right here is actually the BP third person character. So let's hit the browse to asset and content browser icon, and we'll go ahead and click that, and it's sitting right next to it. So this is the blueprint for the third person character. If we take a look at that, Blueprints are really interesting. They're actually a visual scripting language, and you can see how these different nodes, if we zoom in on there with the middle mouse and we right click to pan around, you can see there's different instructions for how this character and this component works. So this is called the event graph, so you can take a look at some of the code that's written for this. And if you go to Viewport, you can actually see the different components over here that make up this actual blueprint. So you see that there's a collision capsule around the character. We've got our character that's right here, which is actually a skeletal mesh. And then we have a camera boom that is pulls the camera back behind the character and has it follow the character. And then we have an actual camera that's giving our camera data inside of the game. So if I take a look and I choose the skeletal mesh actor that we've got right here, you can see here's the skeletal mesh thing right here. Here's the asset. And what we're actually using is SKM skeletal mesh Quinn simple. So if we go click the icon to go find that, that's actually up here in characters. And you can see that there's characters, mannequins, and they have meshes within here. And there's a SK mannequin, there's a Manny simple, and there's a Quinn simple. If we wanted to swap this out for a different character, so like right now, whenever we go play an editor with this button right here, it loads up this model because it's put into this area for the skeletal mesh. If we wanted to use Manny, the male mannequin, we can select it here and we can actually click this arrow and it'll populate it with that right now. We'll go ahead and hit compile and we'll hit save. I'm just going to pull this down just for a second and then I'll go ahead and hit the play button. And then you can see we can move this thing around. And now we're playing with the male mannequin instead of the female character. Okay, so that's how you can choose between the two different models that are within here. I'm going to hit escape to go out of that. Now, if we want to get these models outside of Unreal, we're going to just go ahead and right click over this skeletal mesh asset that we see here. And then we're going to go to asset actions and then we'll say export. Then just go ahead and find yourself a place where you're going to save this thing out. So I've already got a location saved for this. And I put everything that I need as an FBX into an FBX folder. That way it's easy to get back to that. Let's go ahead and hit save. And then that's all we need to do on the Unreal side. So now we're going to hop on over to Maya. Okay, here we are inside of Maya. So we're going to import the model in. Let's just go up here to File, Import, and then Maya, this is our option box. If you click the option box, it's going to give you lots of different options you can choose from here. We're going to make sure that our file type is set to FBX. So if it's not an FBX for you, do the drop down through here and go ahead and take a look there. If you don't see that by any chance, we can come to Windows, Settings and Preferences, and then go to the Plugins Manager. Take a look at that. You should be able to type in FBX, and you should be able to find the FBX Maya.mll. Make sure that that's loaded and set to auto load. It should be there for you, but just in the off case, that's where you can go find it to make sure that it loads for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and click import. We'll go ahead and navigate to where our model sits. And I've got this on the FBX. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and select it and then click import for that. And it's just going to take a second to go ahead and read this file in. Okay, here's the model loaded inside of Maya. We'll go ahead and close this window down here and I'll pull this down. And just to tell you right off the bat, if you don't know Maya's navigation, we kind of talked about this a little bit inside of Unreal. But if you hold down Alt and you left mouse click, that's going to rotate around the model. If you hold down Alt and middle mouse, that will pan the model or pan the camera around. And if you do Alt and then right click, you can zoom in and out of the model. Just like Unreal, if we select this object or something in the world, and then we tap F, it will actually frame it in here and that'll become the new center point that we're looking at on through here. So by default, Maya wants to select joints first and then select a mesh second. So that's maybe why it was selecting the joints on there. But if we just select the mesh, tap F, we can rotate around the center of this object like this. Okay, so I'm just going to push it right about here. And the other thing I'm going to tell you is about setting up the grid. One thing I do like to do inside of Maya to make these wireframes look a little bit nicer, you can turn on this button right here, which is multi-sample anti-aliasing, and we'll go turn that on. And if you want the model to look a little bit nicer, you can turn on screen space ambient occlusion. That does add a little bit of a darkening effect where parts get kind of close to each other. So that looks pretty good like that. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is talk about setting up the grid. And if you don't see the grid, which I do believe you should by default, you can turn on and off this icon that you see here, or we can go to display and we've got grid and we can turn that on or off there. Let's go take a look at the grid, and remember we have these things called the option box inside of Maya where we can click on this. It's going to give us a bunch of different options for the grid. This is what I like to set up for myself to get a scale relationship going between Unreal and Maya. And so basically I'm thinking in meters. So Maya actually works in centimeters, but if we set up our grid in this way, we can basically get something that's really easy to understand, that this would be a 1 meter area right here. And this will be 1 meter here, and then these together will be 2 meters. This will be a little bit more easy to understand after we get this set up. But I set the length and the width of the grid to 100, and it makes a square that you see something like this. We've got grid lines every 50 units, and then subdivision 20, or we could actually do this to something like 10 if you wanted something a little bit visually easier to look at and understand. You can also change the colors on here, and this is what I like to do. I like to have the axis run down through here. I like that to be red. I like these thicker lines to tell me, yeah, this is going to be the bigger units that I'm looking at, and these are the finer increments that I'm working with. You do have to have axis turned on. I got this thicker lines for axis, grid lines, subdivision lines. You can see all the options that I got set on there for that. And then you can go ahead and hit apply. And if you like those settings, you can hit edit and then say save settings, and it should stick for you. And you shouldn't really have to set it ever again like that. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and close this down. It's up to you what you want to use for your values. And if you want some more granular lines within there, you can up the number and stuff like that. You know, it's up to you what you want to choose, but this works out pretty well for me. You can choose your own colors too. So I'm going to close that down, and then I'm going to just show you our first primitive that we would use here. So I'm going to put it on the shelf for poly modeling. I'm not actually going to use it, but you can see that we can get to some primitives just very easily by just clicking on some of this stuff. Now, depending on the settings that you've got in here, this is going to become a different scale or size for you. I'm just going to go ahead and select it and just delete it real quick like that. So I'm going to go up here to create polygon primitives, and then I'm going to do a cube, and then we're going to do the option box for this. Okay, so we're going to take a look at that, everything that we can create for this. So I want to do a 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter cube. And remember, in Maya, we're working with centimeters. So centimeters to meters is we need 100 centimeters for a meter. So that's why our width, height, and depth is set to 100. And the divisions of the cube, I'm just going to put that at 1 by 1 by 1. And I'm going to put this axis, Maya's axis that goes up is actually Y, and Z is going forward and backwards. So that is different than Unreal. You don't really have to worry about the conversion of that. Everything seems to work pretty fine with the default settings that I'm going to be using. But just know that there's a different coordinate system inside of Unreal versus Maya. Okay, so we've got on axis Y. I'm going to go ahead and apply, and you can see here is our 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter cube. Now we can rename this thing. We can call this cube 1M for like 1 meter. Okay. Maya also does this thing where it's got history on it. So if you go into the the channel box area and you click on this input, you can see those values that we used to create the cube with. Those are actually still live right now, so we could actually change some of these values if we wanted, and we could make different size cubes and things like that. We could select this option here, just click on it and middle mouse drag it left and right, and you can see you can interactively change values on the fly for this stuff. So we could do splits right down the center and everything. I'm just going to go ahead and select this. Another thing in Maya, you can select this box, hold down Shift, select all the rest of these, and then I'll just put this at 1, and it'll change all the values of this all at one time. So we could do the same thing for like this if we wanted to make this 50. So I'll make this 100. Okay. Sometimes history is good in Maya. Most of the time it's bad. It's not the best to hold on to that stuff. So you can delete history by Alt-Shift-D. We'll delete history. I'm going to hit undo real quick, and you can go see it's under Edit, Delete by Type, and then History. For every program that you use, my suggestion to you is to start taking a look at the hotkeys that are listed within the program. Try to learn those hotkeys to the best of your ability, and that is going to speed up your workflow as an artist. Okay, so I'm just going to delete the history on this, and you can see if I export this to Unreal, it is going to sit right there like that right now. Like the pivot point, if I tap W, remember just like Unreal, we got W, E, and an R for translate, and then we got rotate, and then we've got scale, which actually exists over here like this. So you can either get to it through here or through hotkeys. But the pivot point is going to come from where is the 0, 0 location of this object in relation to the world. Now Maya can do all kinds of stuff. I'm going to hold on X, and I'm just going to drag this up, and I'm just going to snap right here like this. If I hold on X, I would drag this over. Now you see the pivot point is still in the center of this object, and we're on the world like this. And just because the pivot point is like this in Maya does not mean that that's where the pivot point is going to go in Unreal. So when we export this out, wherever this object sits in the world, it's still going to put the pivot point down to the 0, 0 location. Okay, so I'm going to just undo that real quick, and you guys are probably right there. You can hold on X, you can drag up until it sits right on the grid like there. Or you can go to the channel box, and you can see under Translate Y, I need half the size of the cube to be moved up in this Y translate. So we had 100 units for our cube. To make it sit, because the pivot point's in the middle point of this cube, we just need a value of 50 for that. Okay, so this is a nice way that, you know, sometimes you might be just a little bit off and you can get it pretty close to where you need it to be. And I'm like, hey, I really want that to be at 75 units. So you can actually just type that stuff in, or I want it at 50 units, and I'll do that. Okay. Just because I like to be a little bit more accurate with this stuff, I don't want any translation on the model. I'm just in the habit of doing this. So I'm going to show you this. We're going to go modify. We're going to do freeze transformations, and you can see what that does is it zeroes out the translation, rotation, and leaves the scale 1 by 1 by 1 like that. And then the other thing we're going to do is I'm going to say modify. Since I've done this freeze transformations, you need to do it in this order. I can say reset transformations, and you can see now it's going to put the pivot point back down to the 0, 0 location of the world. So now I've got a pivot point that actually matches what's going on in the world like that. Okay, so we're actually in really good shape, and we can get ready to export this from Maya and push it into Unreal. So let's just go ahead and select the cube. Make sure you are in object mode. You can tap F8 to make sure that your object is this green color. I haven't really talked to you about object versus component mode yet, so don't worry about that. You should be good to go. And we've got our object selected. It's nice and green for us. And then we'll go File, and then we're going to do Export Selection. And then let's do the option box again. And if you don't see FBX Export as your type, then drag this down to FBX Export like this. And we should be good for the options, and say Export Selection. You're going to want to go ahead and you're going to want to navigate to where you're going to export this thing out to. Okay, here's my location where I'm exporting to, and I just gave it the name of cube_1 meter. It's up to you what you want to do. I will say when we get to this point, you should see some options appear for you. And then I do put this on smoothing groups, tangents, binormals, smooth mesh. I have that on. Later on, if you're doing skeletal meshes, you would worry about animation. You can turn that off if you want to. It's not going to hurt anything to have it on. So I'm just going to say export selection, and then that should export the model out. Let's exit out of Maya and let's hop back on over to Unreal to check out importing this object into Unreal. Okay, here we are back inside of Unreal. And this step, I'm going to show you how to import our model into Unreal. And while I do that, I also had the opportunity to talk to you about the content browser and folder structure and trying to keep our work organized. We're going to have a lot of moving parts, so it's pretty important that we do keep ourselves organized. If we do things correctly, whenever we populate any content in this content area, it's possible that you can take like this whole folder for characters, and you can see how the Epic team has organized their stuff. If you actually right click on there, you can say show in Explorer, and it'll go open up a Windows Explorer window and show you exactly where this thing sits, right? And so if you ever wanted to take this from one project to another, you can just copy this whole folder, and you can see that this sits under content and it's under characters, and this folder is called Mannequins. So if you had another project and you made sure that you had the spelling correct and uppercase matched, and within their project, this other project you want to migrate to, you would need a characters folder, and you could just copy this Mannequins folder and then paste it into that location, and it would automatically show up for you in this other project. So it's really easy to move parts and pieces in and out of the programs or projects. You just need to make sure that you're following the same directory structure that they have within through there. Okay, so that's a reason why you'd want to keep everything straight. But like I said, through the course of this project that we're going to be working on, we're going to have quite a few different pieces. So try to keep yourself organized. Okay. All right. So it's really easy to make folders within here. So I'm going to go under content just like this. We can just right click any open area, and we can say add new folder right here. And we'll call this Stone Blocks project. I'll just keep it Stone Blocks just to keep things a little bit smaller for how many characters we have on some of this stuff. So let's double click this. We'll go in here, and then what I've seen Epic do, and it keeps things pretty organized, is they make a meshes folder for all their models. If we make materials, which we will do later, we can say new folder, and we can type in materials like that. So I think that'll be good for now. If we go into the meshes folder, let's just go ahead and right click, and we'll make another folder, and we'll call this Proxy, and this will be our proxy level. I think this will be fine. I'm going to have us do two different proxy levels. One that's just going to be the first basic model, and then we're going to add bevels to that. But I'll show you how to import over the top of your models. But I'm going to have us work in stages from proxy, and then we're going to have a better mesh, and then we'll have an actual sculpted version. So there's going to be like 3 stages to this. Okay, so we're going to go into proxy, and then to get our model in, we're going to right click on here, and we're going to say import to current folder. Okay, so then we need to navigate to where our objects sit. Okay, and here's my cube 1 meter. I'm going to go ahead and select that, and I'm going to click open. And you can see that we've got this. It's probably going to be confusing for you because this is your first time doing some of this stuff. This is an importer, and it's got tons of options because it's an importer for like all the different types that you can import in. We've got static meshes, and then we got skeletal meshes, and we've got animation and materials, textures. So we're only worried about the static meshes. So if we go to static meshes and we say force all mesh as type, and then we'll do static mesh just because that's all we're working with right now. That's all we got to worry about. This will be good for right now. We can go to materials. I don't want to import in materials, and we don't want to import in textures. So I'm going to turn textures off, materials off, and we'll go back to the static mesh stuff within through here. Under build, if we go here, if you remember with the FBX export settings that we said from Maya, we told it to put smoothing groups on, and there should be tangents and binormals. Now, Unreal by default under these build settings will recompute your normals, and that's the shading of the object on here, if it's hard edge or soft edge. I want to retain everything that's going on in Maya because I want to control everything that way. So I'm going to check this stuff off for recompute normals. I'm going to tell it not to recompute tangents, and then that should turn off this compute weighted normals that is on there as well. Now later on, if we had multiple meshes that we exported as an FBX, if we have this combined static meshes off, it will import in multiple models from one FBX file. So you could, let's say you had a car inside of Maya, and you had the body, you had the axles, you had the wheels, and you had those on separate parts, and you export that as one FBX. You could bring it in here, and it would keep it all separate because maybe you could need the wheels to turn and things like that, right? So those need to animate separately. That's how you could bring everything all in one go. But sometimes you just want to export a bunch of different parts and pieces, and then you can have Unreal join the meshes together. So if you wanted that, you could use this combined static meshes. I know this is getting a little ahead of this cube, but I just want you to understand some of the base options of importing in if you wanted to play around with some of this stuff, okay? So that should get us everything that we need. We'll go ahead and click import. And then now we've got this 1 meter cube, okay? So I'm just going to double click on this. And we only had one material assigned to this inside of Maya. So that's going to give us one material slot on there. Now, if we would have assigned to the faces on the model, like we could have assigned a face on the top and then the front and maybe the side, so that you've got like 3 different materials. If we had assigned those to different faces in Maya, those would come in as different material slots, and you can actually assign different materials to these different material slots. So like when you get more advanced, if you're dealing like with a human, that's how you could bring in one mesh, and it's got hair and it's got a skin and it's got eyes, and you would be able to have different materials for each one of those things. So we're not quite there yet, but I just want you to have an understanding of maybe some of the stuff that you're going to be looking at. Right now it's got a default material on it. It's got this checkerboard material. This is the default material whenever you don't have a material set up for something. So this will work fine for us right now. We'll go ahead and click save right there, and I'll close this down. And if you do have a little asterisk on there, that means you need to save something. So you could either save it in, this is called the static mesh viewer window, and you can either save it here. And if it's got a little asterisk on there, you can right click, and then you can say save there as well. Okay, so I'm just going to click and I'm going to drag this out. But if you remember us, I'm going to turn the snapping back on for these different things for the grid and then rotation and then scale. If I've got that already set on, whenever I drag it into the world, it will do its best to try to snap to some part within there. So I'm just going to push this thing down. And what I'm going to do with the cube is I'm going to go to the details panel right here, and I'm going to put this at 0, 0, 0 for the cube, just like this. Now I know it's inside of this thing right here, but I wanted to make sure that this thing is actually going to the center of the world, and then that my pivot point is working the way that I would expect. Remember, I was telling you if we put that cube in my own, we reset the transformations on there, that the pivot point is going to show up right in the 0, 0, 0 location of the world. And so that's happening for us. So I just want to check that and make sure that that's actually going on with the model. So now I can just raise this thing up, and if I hit end, it'll push it back down for us. Remember, we talked about that. I'm going to take the player start that we have, and I'm going to push this right down here and hit let's push it right there, and I'll hit end for that, and maybe move it just a little bit further. I don't know if I can get it in the center there because of this. So now I'll put this back down to 10, and I can move this a little bit finer. So let's go ahead and hit play, and see what's going on with our character and our world. And then here's our cube that we just imported in, and it auto-generated collision for us. So now we can actually just jump on this thing and do something like that, right? Okay. So this might actually be fun for you. Just go ahead and select the cube, and then you can see in the details panel, if we scroll down a little bit to the physics, we can actually tell it to simulate physics. And now if we jump into the game and then we just collide with our cube, we can actually push this thing around and have a little bit of fun with that, just kind of moving the cube around. I'll go ahead and hit escape, and you can see it just pops right back into here. So it's going to do its thing in the game, and then we don't have to worry about that. It's always going to reset back for us. So you remember the earlier session, I was showing you how we can take these objects. If we hold down Alt and then click and then drag out, we can drag out a copy of this like this. And I'm going to hold down Alt and drag up and then just drag over this way. I was saying if you hold down Shift while you move, it will move the camera with you. And then sometimes that makes it a little bit easier for you to navigate through the world. So I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to click this one over about here, hold down Alt, and then drag out a copy here. And I'm going to hold down Alt and then drag up one just right like this. Okay. And then now we're going to go ahead and play. And it's a little bit harder for me to push through some of that stuff, but I can do that. Okay. All right, so I'll let you play around with that and just have some fun with that. And then the next thing that we will do, we'll start taking a look at how we can build more complex models inside of Maya and get those into Unreal, and start working on actually building some modular parts for ourselves. Okay, see you in Maya. Before we get started and we build the parts and pieces inside of Maya, I wanted to talk to you about the concept of modularity. So modularity inside of games is a really big and important thing to understand. And I think where I started off becoming a 3D artist was actually playing around with Legos whenever I was around a teenager. And Legos are a perfect example of a gridded system where you have modular parts, and with those same parts, you can build multiple combinations. So I actually went out and I purchased this Harry Potter Build Your Own Hogwarts Castle. It's very cheap, and if you're looking for something that you could explore some of these ideas, it was only around $10 or so, and I highly advise picking this thing up. You can see that I laid out all the different parts and pieces so you could see some of the repetition in parts. And the same thing is going to happen for us whenever we build inside the computer. The cool thing inside the computer is after you build a part and a piece, you can duplicate it as many times as you want. But with that set that you build, you're going to be able to build all these different kinds of combinations. So one thing I was trying to do and challenge myself whenever I was building with this set was just trying to build different combinations, but I was trying to use every single part in the set. It was just some kind of fun exercise, but if you want, I think this could help you understand this gridded system that you can see that everything is on a very specific system where things can snap together. And with those parts, you can build thousands and thousands of combinations. So that's the same concept that we are going to transfer over to the game world. Now, I do have some examples that I did find of different modular kits and parts and pieces that people have built. And I think you can see if you take that concept we were looking at before, instead of taking parts and pieces that have been provided to you, you're in charge of building your own set pieces, and they can become super complex, right? So like something like this, you can see this is maybe all one piece of a model. Now it could be possible to split this apart into just windows, and then doors and wall pieces, arches, and you could have that as modular chunks as well. But you could combine everything together to make one really large complex thing. The important thing is making sure that you are working on a gridded system to where those parts and pieces can easily snap together, and you can build infinite combinations, or it's really easy to take this chunk and you could push it across a wall, right? So again, same idea on through here for some of this stuff. Taking a look at that, you can see this is more of an urban environment for brick buildings, but then also sidewalks, floors, things like that. If we push over here, we can take a look at some of these ideas. I do think if you are going to try to replicate something in the real world, a really nice example of what to do is pre-planning. So I've seen this quite a bit from different people's projects where they might take building structures and then they try to color code and identify where are the repeatable parts and pieces that I can use over and over again. So my time in visiting San Francisco, I really felt like a lot of the buildings there, they felt like they came straight out of a video game, just because they were such like nice architecture, but then they also had these repeatable elements that you saw over and over again. So again, if you can grasp onto some of those concepts, whenever you start to think about what you're building, instead of building just one-off parts and pieces, if you build it in a way that gives you a little bit more flexibility, you could end up building hundreds of thousands of different parts and pieces. The other thing that's pretty cool that's going on right now is procedural content generation, some different tools, especially things that I've seen inside of Houdini. So maybe a technical artist would work together with an artist and they would build the parts and the pieces that would assemble like building structures and things like that. And then they have a tool that would just basically give them a manipulator, and with a rule set, they could drag this thing out and it would build walls and automatically snap things together. So you can make parts and pieces of your world assemble much easier. And it's all kind of procedural. And then that way, after maybe a tool set's done, you could populate an entire city, you know? So if you did look at a daunting task of trying to build a city as an artist, if you just went one off and you build a building, and let's say that took you a month to build a really nice building, after a month you've got a building. 2 months you maybe got two buildings, right? But if you take the time to make a modular kit and a modular set, maybe it does take you a little bit longer than a month to build an accurate set, but after that set's done, then you get moving really, really quickly. And instead of building, your next building and it takes you a whole nother month for that, you've got something probably within a day where you've got multiple versions that you've built out. So there is a cost up front for setting all this stuff up, but the payoff in the end is really worth the effort. Okay, we're finally at the part where we can start to model inside of Maya, so pretty excited about that. Let's go ahead and take a look at Unreal, and I'm going to show you the parts and the pieces that we're going to be building together. So if we hop on over here and we take a look at the pieces, we've already looked at just doing this basic cube, and you can see the next part is we basically take that basic cube, we double that, so we got something that is like two cubes stacked on top of each other, but I wanted one solid block for that. Then we've got half a cube, so we'll just divide that in half. We've got this side trim piece that is like these smaller pieces within through here. I've got what I call the cube top, so it's something that could just fit on the top of here. So it's actually half the height of this half cube, so it's 1/4 of the height of this one. Then I've got this trim piece that you can see right down here. I do have these more like a triangular shaped pieces that I was using for trusses and things like that. We could use that. And then you can see that this is this half arch that we've got here. And then I built these trim pieces for the arches that go into the trim pieces that go on the side here. So with that and those combinations, we're able to build a whole lot for this environment. Now, a little bit later, I'll get into, how we do the sculpting part and we get out of this detail and things like that. But right now, we're just building the Blockout parts and pieces for this set. And this is basically what that looks like. All right, so let's get started in here. We've already got this cube that we said was a cube 1 meter. I'm actually just going to change the name on this. I'm going to keep things consistent with what I had before. So I'm just going to call this cube, and this is my basic cube that I've got. One other change about this, I did show you earlier in the video that we would put this at the center of the world, sitting on the floor, and then this is going to be our pivot point for this. because we're going to be using this in a modular way, and we're going to be flipping and rotating and trying to get the most usage out of this, what I did find is actually putting this thing back down and putting it at -50 right here like this when we export will allow us to move it in the world, snap to the grid, and let us rotate the part in piece in a much easier way. But as we go along, we'll discover like what's probably the best place for a pivot point. And really that's kind of a little bit of a personal decision for you. You'll discover what works for you and what works best. But I'm just going to go modify. I'm going to freeze the transformations. That's going to get rid of the transformations over here, zero that out, and then I'm going to say reset transformations, and that should move the pivot point to the 0, 0 point there. Okay, so there's our cube. If you just need a refresher for this, we could be in the modeling toolkit right here. We're under the polygon modeling shelf, so it's really easy for us to select these different primitives that we have. But in order to create those, we're going to go to create polygon primitive, and we can get to the primitives here. These are the option boxes inside of Maya, so it's easy for us to go and say cube, option box, and then this is where we can numerically set all the different values. Remember that we're working in centimeters, so a width, height, and depth of 100 by 100 by 100 will give us a 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter cube, and then we tested that out and exported that into Unreal. Divisions in the model, we've only got that set to 1 by 1 by 1, and the axis we're pointing up in Y for that. And if we hit apply, then we should, you see it's going to make a brand new polycube for us. It's going to put us at in that exact position that we have here. All right, so I'm actually going to leave that in Maya. If you want to hide things, you can just tap H, and you can see it hit it in the outliner over here. If you select it again over here, you can tap H and you can bring it back. So I'm just going to hide that real quick. And then this one I'm going to call cube. I'm going to call this underscore double, like this. Okay, and then this one, the only thing that's really different about this is the height on that. We're going to put that to 200, just like this. And again, if I want the maximum ability to just rotate this thing and flip it around and things like that, I'm going to leave the pivot point of this right in the center. So we really don't have to do anything else with this. You do want to delete history on this. The hotkey for that is Alt-Shift-D. Okay, and that will delete history. If you want to take a look at that, you can go to Edit, Delete by Type, and then History. So I'm just going to get rid of the history on there. So we've got cube double. We've already made that one. I'll go ahead and hit hide for that. Let's go ahead and then let's use the shelf. Let's go ahead and make a cube based off of that. It's going to remember our settings that we set here for this, right? So all we got to do is hit that button, and we got a cube here. And then this one is going to be cube half. So under creation of this, the height, let's put this at 50, right there like that, okay? So I like to just steal names when I can and things like that. So I can copy that, double click on there and paste it, and then I'll call this half right there like that. I'm not the best at typing, so anytime I can steal some information, that does speed things up for me. So again, remember we can tap H, we can hide that object. I'm just going to make a new cube at this point. Okay, and this one is going to be our cube top, like this. And this one, we're going to make it a height of 25, because we're going to go half the distance of this half right there, so it's going to be a quarter for us. Okay. And if we want to delete history, remember Alt-Shift-D will delete history. I'm just going to check my objects and delete the history on that. You can use it live if you want. Like, you can keep that history on there. It's just if you do modeling operations a little bit later, it could be problematic. Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and hide that one. I'll pick H. I am going to bring back our basic cube because we're going to work on a trim piece. And I do want to have this as some kind of frame reference. So I'll just hit the create, cube option like we've been doing. And on this one, the height, I want to set this to, I'm going to try 50 for the height. And then the depth, I'm going to put at 25. And then I'm going to go ahead and move this. I'm going to put it on W for move, or you can grab it over here. If you hold down X, we're going to temporarily turn on grid snapping, and I can hold down X and then drag forward just like this. Now the grid increments that we have is snapping to 10 10 units. So that's why it's going to 60. So if I needed this to be anything higher than that, then I would have to go here. I might have to put this at 62.5, just like that. And then I'm going to push this up, and you can see we need to go up to about 25 units. So I don't think that's the best looking thing for trim. It is a little bit, it's a little bit thick, but it will allow us to snap much easier. Now, this is up to you if you want to do this or not. But we could do this. This will still work with dividing this in half. So if we did 12.5, we would get a much thinner piece of trim. I think visually that's going to look a lot nicer, but it's going to make your life a lot more difficult to snap correctly whenever you're inside of Unreal. So I'll leave that up to you what you want to do with that. But like I was saying, it is going to make your life a little bit more difficult. Let's see what the number would actually need to be on something like that. So it looks like the value that we need is actually 56.25. So a little bit more difficult to find that. Let me just show you how I found this real quick, because this can show you some more options about Maya. If we tap the spacebar over one of our windows, we can hover over a different view. We can tap F to find that model. And you can see when we put our cursor over each one of these, and if we tap a spacebar, we can go into that view mode. So I'm actually, if I tap 5, that's our shaded mode that you see right here. And sometimes you want to see through the model and you want to see wireframe, and that could be helpful for you. If you tap 4, you can click this wireframe option. You can cycle between wireframe and this. And so what I did, I just went to the side view and I tried to line this up the best that I possibly could and try to figure out like what I'm getting really, really close, right? So now if I do 56.25, I was able to find that number and be able to snap to that. And then now I can just tap the space bar to go out of that and then go to here and then check this out here at that point. Again, it's a little bit much, right, for me. So I'm just going to put this at 25. Then at that point, it's still going to be a little bit easier to get those values set for this. And again, I'm going to want this to be right in the center. So I'm going to tap 4 so I can just see through everything. If I hold down X, you can see we can still snap to the grid and we can just move our cursor around and we can get this right in the center. And you can see actually the values for that is just 0, 0, 0 through translate X all the way through rotate. If you want to change those values all at once, you select here, hold down Shift, click in here, and then you can just tap 0 or 1 or 5. You can see how we're changing those values, but it's super easy for us to zero that stuff out. Okay, now we do have history on there, so Alt Shift D will delete history on that. And then this one is called cube underscore trim. Okay, so there's our trim piece. I think the next one that would make sense, let's go ahead and hide that. Let's hide our cube basic. Let's just create another cube. And something else that would be useful for you all is this. So tap 5 to go into shaded mode. I've got our mannequin that we've got here, and it's, we could always just tap H or we can hide that. But one thing I wanted to show you is layers, which is a really nice option. So if we have our mannequin selected and we come over here to the layers area, you can see there's this little button that says create a new layer and assign selected objects. Go ahead and click that and it'll give it a name. And let's just call this scale ref underscore. And I like to keep layer at the end of it, just because Maya is really picky about names, and if I don't want this to interfere with anything else. So I just like to leave this underscore layer on there like that. So now that just makes it really easy for us to show and hide this thing. We can also put it in this template mode, which just kind of, you'll see through the thing like this, right? And then if we do R, it's reference, so you can see it, but you can't actually select it. And then we could just put it on normal mode, which is you can see it, you can select it, you can do all your normal stuff. So that gives you some nice options for things on there. So I'm just going to turn off the visibility of the mannequin so we don't see that. Okay. And then the next thing I'm going to do is this. I'm going to take this new cube that we did. I'm just going to hold on X. I'm going to move it up and make sure it's on 50 right here, like that. And then we're going to do that arch that we've got. And we need to subtract a shape from that. Okay, so that means we're going to do something different and we're going to add a cylinder to this. I want to check out the creation options of this. Let's go create polygon primitives and let's do a cylinder. Let's do the option box for this and see where we're at with things. And so right now I've got a radius of 1, height of 2, divisions of 16. This is not going to work out for me the way I want, so I know we're going to be changing this stuff. Let's just leave it at the default, like edit, reset settings. So here's the default for it. Let's just go ahead and hit apply. And let's see, if I do 4 like this so I can see through it, I know that I need to rotate my object. So if you remember WER, they'll give us the hotkeys for this. So let's tap E to put on rotate. And if you want to rotate and snap to degrees of increments, you can, this is a weird hotkey, but J. Hold down J and you can rotate and you can see it's going to snap to 90 degrees. Now, if that doesn't work for you, you can just come over here, you can type in 90, just like that. And then now I could take this, I could scale this thing up. And maybe now that's where I take a look at the shading of this. So what I like to do is, instead of trying to figure out exactly what's going on with the math for this, I usually like to, you know, try to get it as close as I possibly can and then take a look at the numbers, and then usually I can figure out, okay, if I wanted to subtract this thing away from this, I would need this to be 50 units to make it the same scale as that. Okay. But we want to do an arch going from here all the way over to here. So instead of 50, let's double that. Let's go to 100, just like this. Okay. And then now we can move it. So I'm going to tap W to put on the move tool, hold down X, and I should be able to snap just right over here to the side. So you can see the numbers for this is we're going to move it over 50 units. It's rotated 90 degrees like this. And we've got a scale of 100, you know, 100, just like that. The next thing is I just know that from modeling, you want to use certain powers of division for whenever you model certain things. So normally I would do something like, we would do something like 8, and you can see we've got an even number that, like, if we connected geometry going from here to here, that would give us a nice even division on that. The next one up would be if we did 16, and you can see it keeps that center point right here like that for us. And then the next one up, which is I think the number that we need, we'll go to 32, so we'll double that. So we've got some topology on there. It looks pretty decent. And then we could easily turn that into quads a little bit later whenever we start doing some more complex modeling operations. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is this. We could have this the same exact size as this thing, so we could put that at 50 units. But we're going to do a Boolean operation. And in a Boolean operation lets you either join things together or intersect them with each other to find the difference between the shapes, or you can do a difference where you actually are carving something out for something. Now this should work. Like they are sharing the same like location for these faces, but to be on the safe side, if you had that to be just a little bit larger, you know, that would probably be a smart thing for you to do. So we've got our two pieces, and I want to subtract this from this. So the order does matter on this. I'm going to select this object first, and I want to subtract this one here. And so you can see now if we go under mesh, and then let's go to booleans, and you can see that option. So you, depending on your selection order, you can do a difference A minus B or B minus A. I selected that one first, so I'm going to use this difference A minus B. And the cool thing is, it's now with our booleans, it puts it in this mode where you can see that it's actually live, so we can move this thing around just like this. We can scale it. And so we can see what's going to happen with the Boolean before we commit to it. Okay, so I'm happy with what I have. I'm going to go ahead and select this object that you see here, and then I'm going to hit Alt-Shift-D to delete the history, and that will that should just flatten everything out for us. Yep, just like that. Not sure why it didn't hold, but I had to just reselect this thing and delete that. And so then now I've got this this piece that's working for me. On this one, I am going to move it over, just like this, hold down X, and then push it over just right here, just like that. And that will become my new pivot point right down here on the bottom, and I'll keep it in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to go modify, freeze transformations, and then I'll say modify, and I'll say reset transformations, and that put our pivot down there. I'm going to hit undo real quick. I want to show you this one other thing, because if you do want to move your pivot point and you want to be in control of that, you can tap D, and that will put you in and out of this mode. So if we keep spamming D, we can go in and out of just regular moving and then moving the pivot point. Super easy, right? So now when we're in this mode of moving the pivot, we can hold down X and we can snap to the grid, and we can move it over so we can manually do that. If we hold down V, it temporarily turns on vert snapping. So if we wanted to move this on one of these axes and push it up, you can see it's snapping to this vert here, 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 like that. If you want to hold down V and click in the middle, you can move it explicitly, like by just moving your cursor around like that. So it's really easy to move this thing around. I'm going to hold down X, and I'm just going to move on just this one axis at a time, and it'll just push it right back there, and I'll tap D, and then now my pivot point is moved. So now you got some more options for how you can move your pivot point around. So this is going to be cube underscore, and we're going to call this actually in my scene I called it something different, but I'm just going to keep this consistent. I'll say cube, and let's do half arch like that. Okay, so that gives us that. Now we need to make the trim piece for this. Okay, so I should have paid attention to what those numbers were before, but I'll just recreate it again. We get the cylinder. We can put it on the rotate tool. Hold down J. We'll just rotate this thing 90 degrees. We'll scale it up, and I do believe the number for that was 100, like this. And then we just moved it over 50 units, like that. And we put this on 32 divisions, right? Okay. So now we got everything we need for this, except the width of this. Let's put this at 25. Looks pretty large for some trim pieces. I'll leave this up to you. This is again this is kind of a personal decision of yours and what you want to do with this. I do think if we had at least 20 units, that looks a little bit more visually interesting to me. The other one's probably a little bit too chunky for my taste, so I'll go ahead and leave it there like that, because again, the alternative would be doing 12.5, and that still looks pretty good. It just gives us these odd numbers to snap around with. So again, the easiest thing to do would be just do 25 like that, but I'll leave it up to you. For simplicity's sake, I think I'm going to put it at 25 and just leave it there. Again, this personal decision of yours. So we're going to subtract another one of these cylinders away from itself. I'm going to hit Control D, and that will actually duplicate. So that's under Edit, and then we've got Duplicate. There's a hotkey for that. And that makes it really easy for us to duplicate our objects. And this is an interesting way of scaling. I just want to show you that this is possible. So normally this is uniform scale, and we can scale this in and out. This scales on an individual axes like this, but it's possible to scale two axes at one time. So if you hold down Control, click on this right here, you can see what we got. So I'm just going to scale it on one axis here, this which is Z, going down the Z dimension. But actually, we rotated the object so you can see we're scaling in, looks like Y, but within the world, it looks like we're scaling through Z. If we hold down Control and then click on this, you can see how we are just scaling those two axes at the same time, but it keeps the length of this the same. So what I want to do is I'm going to keep this at increments of 25. So I'll put this at 75 like this for those two. This doesn't really matter. We're just using this as a subtractive shape, just like we did before. And then now let's turn on wireframe unshaded. So this is something new I'm showing to you. This will show you the solid modeling view, but it also shows you the outlines of the wireframe so you can see what's going on with your topology a little bit better. Okay, so now we're going to do a Boolean between this shape and this shape. So I'm selecting this, holding down Shift, selecting my second shape, and then we're going to go to Mesh, Booleans, and remember, we're going to use this difference A minus B. Select that. Again, it's live, so you could just select the shape that you see here, this ghosted version, and you can see what it's going to look like before you commit to it. I'll select this piece here, and then delete history, Alt-Shift-D. Let's see. And I don't know why I got to select that twice, but selecting it twice, just deleting it. I'm not gonna fight it. But yeah. So in our case, now we've got this shape that we need, but I don't want the whole ring, right? I want to turn this into a more modular part. So if I had this chunk right here, I could duplicate this, flip it. It would give me a whole lot of other options, and we can put some straight parts to this, and then we can do a whole lot more with it, right? So I'm going to show you now. We haven't talked about this, so we're at this point where we need to talk about operating in object mode versus component mode. So if you think about the entire object, that's the much bigger thing. And then we need to get to more granular level of operations, and we need to work with faces, edges, and verts, right? So in Maya, you can tap, this is object mode, and then this is component mode. The hotkey for this, and I'm really big on using the hotkeys if I know them, is F8 will just cycle between these two different modes that we have here. Okay. Now it's possible that you can come up here when you're in component mode, and you could turn on and off selection mask for vertices, for edges, and faces. This is going to be maybe a little bit weird for you if you're not a Maya user, but then you saw F8 was this cycling between the two different modes. When I'm in component mode, just move your finger over to F9, and that will let you select vertices. If you do F10, that's going to do your edges. So F9 smaller, F10 a little bit larger, and then F11 is going to be your faces, and then that's much larger. So smaller component to medium to large, right? And so F9, F10, and F11. Okay. Now, if you don't like that way of getting in between your components, the other method that you could do is you could just right click over the top of this, and you can see that we can go back and forth between object mode and component mode. Or we could go into, and then we could say, I want to select an edge, or I want to select vertices, and I can select faces. If you did notice on there, it actually remembers, hey, this was the last vert selection you had, this was the last edge selection you had, and then this, and so on. So I'm going to do F11. I like to use the hotkeys, so we can select faces, or you can just right click in there, say face. It's up to you. And I'm just going to drag a marquee over this chunk right here, and I'm going to rotate around, just check to make sure you didn't select through anything weird. If you don't want to do that, you could just tap 4 for wireframe view. You can see through it. I'm just going to hit delete or backspace, and I'm going to get rid of that part, and I'm going to get rid of this part right here, like that, and I'll tap 5 to show you this. So this is unfortunate. Not really sure why this happened, but looks like it lost some of the shading on here for the material, and that's pretty easy to fix. Let's just right click and say assign existing material, and I'm just going to use the standard surface that's on there like that. So that should just, if you encounter that, maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't know. That should fix it pretty easily for us. The other thing that we're going to do is now we got these open faces. So there's a couple different ways that we could handle this. If we went to edges mode, if we hit F10 or we right click on here and say edge, we select this edge and then this edge. I'm going to hold down shift to select it. And if we do shift right click, it's going to give us a whole different menu context for stuff that we can do. But I'm looking for the bridge function, and that should bridge these two things together for us. Okay. And if you're a menu person, you can go to edit mesh, and then this is where the bridge exists within through here. Okay, so that's one way of being able to do it. Now it does have this thing for divisions on here and stuff. I'm just going to leave that alone. The other thing that we could do is if we've got just an open face on here like that, even if we had this missing right here, I'm going to just hit F11. I'll delete it just to show you this. And on this mode, I'm going to tap F8 for the object mode. I can shift right click, and then I'm going to say fill hole right here. So that'll fill those two holes just like that. And again, if you're a menu person, this one's under mesh, and then we can say fill hole right there like that. As far as I could tell, mesh, maybe this is bigger operations on maybe the object mode kind of thing. And then edit mesh is maybe things that are done a little bit more with components and things like that. So they're trying to organize these things. The other thing they did is you can see these icons that they've got. So if you're using the shelf, maybe start getting used to these different icons that they've got. So this will start to build up some history on things. I don't want to keep history around. I'm going to hit Alt-Shift-D to delete history on there. And then now I'm going to call this one, we're going to call this cube. And I'm going to call this half arch underscore inner trim. Just like that. Okay. Okay. And then we've got those pieces made. This location is going to be fine for me. Now the pivot point's not where we want it to be. Again, we got a couple different ways we can do that. We can go to modify, reset transformations, or we can tap D, hold down X, and then we can move that there, and then tap D again, and we're good to go. Okay, so now we've got our arches done. We can just go ahead and select both of them and select one, hold down shift, select the other one, tap H to hide it. And then the last thing that we got to create, I'm sorry, not the last thing, but we're close, is let's just do this side trim piece. So we'll click the cube again, and the numbers that I was using to try to make life easy on myself was just a number for 25, just like that. Okay. Now we can bring back this inner trim. I'm going to tap H, and we can take a look at that. And oh, see, I'm not paying attention close enough here. So this is a unit of 25 by 25 by 100, and I actually want this to line up to this, and I must have made that 50 because I'm going to put this at 0.5. Let's move this real quick. I'm going to tap X to move this up, and then move this over. What's the value of this? Okay, to get this to fit on here with this was a value of 12.5. This is what I was saying where this is going to get a little bit dicey for us to have to keep a hold of these numbers in our head. So if I push this back down, hold on X, I'm going to snap to the grid right here like this, and I just push this thing up, and those values are easy to get. That's just 50 units. If I push this thing over, this might be smarter for us to have this value just set like this, and I might push this up 50 units just like that, and then I will let the pivot point, let's just say modify freeze transformations and then reset transformations, and then now it should be easy for me to raise that up, and then I've got a unit of 100. And what that'll allow me to do is just snap these things together a bit easier inside of Unreal. Like I was saying, for some of the other parts, if the values work out well, we can put the pivot in the center because we're going to rotate that thing a lot and flip it and everything else. But for some of these things, you might find that to have specific pivot point in another location might be more of an advantage for you. So you can see, like, I'm testing this out already and learning how I should probably have this, so I can just snap this. This stuff can go back to 0. Just put this back here, and I can hide these. And then this is where I'm going to put the pivot for this. The other thing that I didn't do on this, I did some scaling on there, and we did look at freezing transformations. But if I say modify freeze transformations, I'm going to go to the option box, and I'm going to make sure it's on translate, rotate, scale. It's possible that if you only want to freeze just scale or something like that, you could uncheck the other ones. You could just do that, and then we could freeze everything at the same time, or one individual of these channels that you got here. Okay, so I'm going to hide that. And then now the name for this is cube side trim, like that. Okay. And then the last piece that I had was actually just doing this diamond truss, I was calling it. So I'm just going to duplicate this shape. I'm going to make these things actually snap to like this piece that I've got here. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this. And then now I can talk to you a little bit about, welding or snapping verts. So there's lots of different options for this. I'm going to show you one real quick. I'm going to tap F9, or you can right click on here and say vertice. I'll select this vert and we can move it up. If you hold down V, we can snap to this one here. If we do this one, hold down V, and we can snap it here. Okay, so it looks like it's snapped up, but if we select our verts, you can see they're not actually welded together. So I'm going to push this back down here. I'm going to show you an option that we have for doing this. We can go either into the modeling toolkit, which is up right here, and then they've got a, it's called target weld, and that will go ahead and let you click and drag this up to this one here. Or if I have a vert selected, the other way to get to that is shift right click. And then we've got this menu that we can go to, and you can see this will let you go in and out of some of the different parts and pieces to this stuff. If you've got multiple options, yeah, you can see like that. This one's got this little arrow, so it's got multiple options within that, and we can pull back down. But within there, I'm just going to drag up, and then we got target weld. So that's another way that we can get to this. So I can weld it that way. Okay, I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to show you some more options. So remember, we just did this. We moved these. We snapped them by holding down V and then snapping over the top of this, just like that, but they're not welded together. If we drag over two verts like this, and then your manipulator should be right on the top of this. So if you ever get confused and you drag over more, your manipulator is probably going to be in the center of that. If I drag over this, I know that I've got these two verts selected now. If we do shift, right click, there's a merge vertices, and we can do merge vertices to center, and now that should merge those two together, and you see they're welded. This is still not. That's one way that we can always merge two verts together. This other thing that we have is this. If I just drag a marquee around the entire object and I hold down shift right click, there is a merge vertices, and if we do this one with the option box, it's going to give us this threshold. I think the default for this, is always merge for two vertices. I'm not going to do that. But if we put this at a very low threshold, like 0.001, that means that basically these verts have to be like sitting directly on top of each other in order for it to merge together. If I hit apply, I did snap those, so I know those merge together. But take a look at this. Why I like that option is because I was able to just select the entire object, not worry about any kind of selection, and I'm pretty meticulous about making sure my verts are snapped together, so those are snapped right on top of each other. And with that really low threshold, I can hit apply, and then I can make sure that any verts that are unwelded just weld within the object that's here. All right, so there's a few different options for you on how you could take this and merge this together, and you can see that this now should work with this piece, and we should be able to move and snap this thing fairly easy for the work that we're doing. I'm just going to change the name of this, and I'm going to call this Diamond Truss. Just like that. And then we could, I'm just going to double check everything. Go to the channel box over here. We don't have any history. If we do, Alt-Shift-D on our pieces, and all of our pivot points should be set for things. And I'll just go ahead and bring back the visibility of everything, just like this. And so these are the parts and pieces that we have. Last thing I want to show you is how we can organize some of this. So we're going to select this, hold down Shift, select here, hit Control G, and that will add a group for us over here. And then let's just call this Proxy L1 for Proxy Level 1. Okay, let's take a look at how we can get all the models that we just made outside of Maya and put that inside of Unreal. And I'm here in Maya. I'm going to go ahead and take the folder, and I can just export this. Before I do that, I do want to show you something that I think is a good best practice if you want to move these parts and pieces around inside of Maya and be able to have this export right in the center, because this looks a little bit confusing and jumbled up. There's something that we could do with that. We can open this up and select all our pieces. So we select the top one, hold down Shift, select all the way down, just like that. And you see this is the Maya time slider that we have here. Currently no animation data on here at all. So we can just keep it here just like that. I'm going to select the top, translate X, go all the way down to rotate Z, and hold down Shift, click that. And I'm going to right click on here and say key selected. And that will set a keyframe for translation and rotation for each one of the parts that we have here. Now it's just a matter of us going through, and it's up to you how you want to rearrange these and move these out. So I'll just put this in a time-lapse mode, and when I get back, I'll show you just setting a hotkey for that. Okay, I've got all the parts and pieces arranged, and again, we can just select like I showed you before, or we can just click and drag a marquee around everything, and that will select everything in the viewport. We just have models in here right now, so not a big deal. If you have other things in the scene and you don't want to make sure you don't select those, you can go to the show menu, and then under viewport, you could turn everything off on all of this stuff, and then you could individually turn things on. So if you want to turn everything off, you can say none. And then now if I just wanted to show just polygons, then we would have to find the polygons within through here, right here, like that. And then we could show just the polygons. If you say show all, it's going to show everything. So that's another way of being able to grab this stuff pretty quickly. Now I already have a keyframe set on here. I'm going to be careful, because if I click and drag this to the right, it will remember this keyframe, and it's going to set everything back to where it was keyed at. Now there's a way that we can get around this inside of Maya, and we can move this time marker here without actually changing the time and getting everything to snap back. So just middle mouse drag this to the right like that. And then now we're going to select this, hold down Shift, select, right click, and say key selected. And then now we've got a little thing on the time slider. So we've got the ability to go ahead and put parts and pieces, try them out inside of the viewport. Let's see how that looks. And then we can put this back into the center for us whenever we're ready to export this thing out. One thing that I haven't been talking about so far is making sure that you're saving your files. So to save a file in Maya, you just go File, say Scene As, and should be able to take you where you want to save it. Just give it a name. I was giving it the same name as this here, so I call this Maya_Proxy L1. But please make sure that you're saving your work regularly. All these different programs that we're going to use, they crash quite a bit, and it's going to be rather frustrating. So you really need to take the time, and I would not go longer than 15 minutes without saving a file while you're working on things. You'll get burned enough times, and you'll find that you definitely want to be saving these files. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead, and in this case, last time I showed you how to export a box, so you know how to export individual pieces, but I did want to show you the power of FBX and exporting an entire group out and some of the options that you can do with that. So we're going to just select the group right here for the FBX group that we've got, say File, Export, Selection. We're going to do the option box. And then we're going to set this to FBX export, just like that. And then we're going to go ahead and say export selection. You're going to need to navigate. In my case, and I would suggest this for all of you, to try to be as organized as you possibly can. So you can see that I've made a folder. I call my stuff tools and resources. In there, I've got a Maya folder, FBX, ZBrush, Unreal, renders, OBJ, and I might actually even add a few more folders a little bit later on through the process. But this is a pretty good start. So this is where I can keep out all my FBX files, just like that. And again, I'll just give it the same name as what we got here. So I'm just going to call this proxy underscore L1. And actually, I'm going to put a GR at the end of it. It's just my name convention for group. So then that way I know it's not just one individual object. It's going to be an actual group. So I'm going to say export selection. And then the next thing we need to do is hop on over to Unreal. So here we are inside of Unreal. And what we are going to do now is we are going to import our models into this folder that we have. And I already made a folder. I did change the name on you behind the scenes, and I'm trying to be consistent with things. So I just called this proxy underscore L underscore 1. So then that matches what I've been doing inside of Maya. If you do keep things consistent, it's going to make your life a lot easier. So we looked at this importing just one single cube. So now we're going to right click and we're going to say import to current folder. Okay, it's going to ask us to navigate to where that sits. Let me just pull this down real quick. I'm going to select the proxy underscore L1 group that we just exported out. Go ahead and hit open. And then we're going to get our import content thing again, right? So we're going to do static meshes. And it should actually recall the settings that we did last time. But let's just make sure we go through that again. So if I want, I can go to the static mesh area. I can say force all meshes as type, and I can say static mesh. I could turn that on just like that. And then I'm going to go to the build area, and I turned off recompute normals, recompute tangents. This is all grayed out right here like that. Just like that there. And then on the static meshes area, here's what we want to pay attention to. All right, so we just exported a group that's got a bunch of parts in there. And if we want them to stay separate, just like we had in Maya, we need to make sure that this is unchecked, okay? So if this is checked, and this is actually a cool feature, when you need it, it will take all those meshes and it'll combine it and it'll make it into one model. So it's up to you. So you got options now. So we're going to uncheck that, make sure that's off. And if you did have materials already set up inside of Maya or something like that, you could try to import that in. That only really makes sense. Like if you got a material and it's got textures on it, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show you how to make our own. I just want everything to be nice and clean. We're not importing materials. Textures is turned off, and let's just say import. So those are the options that we need for things. Okay. So you can see very quickly, it just did that whole thing for us. It's got the same naming convention that we had inside of Maya. And now we're ready to start working with this stuff. Okay, so let me show you this. We're going to double click on these meshes, and that's going to bring up what is called the static mesh viewer window. Okay, so I'm going to pull this down a little bit more so we can see everything that's going on. We'll double click this one, this one, this one, this one, this, and all the way down the line. And I just have one material assigned to these objects inside of Maya. I was telling you before, if you know how to do face selections, and if you assigned material in Maya, you could have multiple slots for that. We're not really too worried about that right now, so there should be one material slot in here. And if you have multiple material slots in here, that means somewhere, somehow in Maya, you have assigned multiple materials to things, right? Let me just hop over to Maya real quick and I can show you this. If you want to make sure everything's got the same material on there, you just select everything like we've done before. When you hold down Shift, select that. You can right click on this and say assign existing material. And I would just put it on the standard surface. You could either do that or Lambert 1. These are default materials inside of Maya, so they're not going anywhere. And yeah, so you got that, export that out, and that should solve that problem for you. Okay. All right. So that should take care of that. Now we're ready to start working and putting some materials on here. Okay. So I'm going to go to this materials folder that I made. And if you don't have that folder, I made a stone blocks folder for like everything that I want to do for this project. I made a materials folder. So you just need to be in the stone blocks thing, right click. And anytime you want to make a new folder, just go ahead and do that. If you need to rename a folder, you can hit F2 and that will put you in the mode for renaming things. So I'm going to go to material right here. And now we're going to right click and we're going to say material. And we're going to do this. Epic does this naming convention where they do M underscore at the beginning of all their materials. And I'm just going to call this basic. I don't want to do basic material. I'll just do basic and I'll call this parent like this. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and double click on this to open up the material editor graph window. And here, if you right click, you can move things around like this, and you can scroll the zoom wheel on your mouse, and that will let you move everything around here. So we're not going to do anything too crazy. We are going to just use base color, metallic. We can put some control on there for specular, and we'll do roughness right now, and that's all we need at this point. I'm going to continually show you how to improve this stuff and give us some more options for things. Okay. But what's really cool about the Unreal system is you can get pretty deep with how complex that you make these materials. And then you can add parameters to this. So if you make what's called a material instance, it makes it real easy to tune those values inside the engine. So we're actually going to do that together right now. So in Unreal, it's possible if you hold down 1 and click, and 2, 3, 4, these are different values that we can set. And this is a single value, double value. So this might be like, think of UV coordinates. This is just any kind of scalar, any kind of value that you want to change. This one here is, actually, there we go. This one's got 3 values, so it's red, green, and blue. And if you tap forward, then you get, red, green, and blue. This is actually got this on here too, but this has got red, green, blue, and alpha on here. But you can also just use these as different channels to pass data and everything, all right? So we've got this ability to create these nodes, and if you want to parameterize this stuff, you just right-click on it and you say convert to parameter, and then you give it get to give it a name at that point. Okay, I'm just gonna marquee, select all this, delete it. One thing that's pretty nice about this, if you have these open pins on basically all your operations feed into this final thing, and this is what's outputs the material. If you want, you can just right click on there and say promote to parameter, and it'll create nodes for you, and it usually gives you this name of that thing. So I don't like to type, so there's that. Now base color, this is going to be a little bit weird for people who've never heard the term linear color space. But in order to get a mid-gray in here, the value is actually 0.182, like that. Okay, so you would think, no, shouldn't that be like 0.5? Isn't that the middle value from going from 0 to 1? Numerically it is, but in linear color space, it's not. So if you're interested in that, you could go ahead and look up your own information on sRGB color space, like the color space of your monitor versus linear color space. It's like a whole lecture all in itself. So I'll leave that to you. But if you want to know that magic number, 0.182. Okay. So now we've got a material that is just mid-gray. We're going to right click on metallic and say promote to parameter. Now this is a 0 to 1 value, and it says basically it's either metallic or not. You can give middle values, but people that know lighting calculations and they're really concerned about their material values, they'll probably get mad at you if you use something different than 0 or 1 on this. So we're not making a metallic a material, so we'll just leave that at 0. Okay. This is a change that they added, where this value for specular used to be 1, and now they've set it to 0.5. So you can push this up higher if you want. You can make it lower. But this basically, if you put this at 0, you can see the specularity just gets killed on there. So this is independent of what's going to be going on with roughness. So we'll just leave this at 0.5, but it will at least make the control for us like that. And then roughness, let's say right click, promote to parameter, and then roughness, this one's pretty easy to understand too. If you have a roughness value of 0, you basically have glass, right? I'm going to hold down L and then just click and drag. You can move the light around. I just want us to be able to see the highlight and everything a little bit better on there. So roughness of 0 is going to be like glass, super smooth. You can see this highlight is super small and the surface is super reflective, right? So if we put this at 0.5, it kills the reflectivity quite a bit, and our specular is pretty broad on there, right? So let's try something like 0.25, and this has got a little bit of reflectivity to it. The specular highlight is getting bigger on it, and this feels probably a little bit more like a plastic material. If we go 0.75, you can see it's starting to get really matte, like some clay that's maybe got just a little tiny bit of sheen to it. And if you want it to feel like something that has no specular, no reflectivity, then you put it at 1 like that, right? And we can get this to be a very dry, like brittle looking material at that point. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll put this at 0.5 like that. I'm going to click save for the material. And this is the other thing why we want to do these material instances. You can see every time we change values and everything, there is a time association with it compiling that shader. And the more complex that you get, it's going to take a whole lot longer. So after the shader's made and these values, these parameters are exposed to us, then you can actually just tune that stuff live. So there is a setup cost at the beginning of doing this, but the ability to be able to tune your materials later is huge. So it's worth the investment. Okay, so I'm just going to close that down. Then you see we've got a material now. I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to say create material instance right here. So now we've got a material instance. This one, I don't want to call this a parent. So I'm going to double click on there, but then you remember if we hit F2, we can rename this. And then I'm just going to take off the parent aspect of this. This is going to be mbasic instance like that. Okay. And if we double click this and open it up, you're going to be able to see if we go to this global scalar parameter values that we set, and here's a global vector parameter values that we set. Scalar is single values, vectors 3 different values that we've got here. If we click these on like this, we can actually tune the values of this. I'm going to get this smaller just so we can see what's going on. Let's go ahead and save the material instance just for right now. And there's different ways that we can assign things, the materials to the parts and pieces that we see in the world. So this is from our previous session. You can just click and drag the instance on the object inside of the world, and you can see it's going to change and it's going to update. So that's one way to do it, but that's per object, right? So that matters for the objects that exist inside of the world. It's not changing that at a global value. If we wanted to change it at a global value, let's go back to this proxy. And you remember this was the first cube that we imported in. Just double click on that. We'll open it. And here's our material slot that we've got. So we can go to our material folder, just take this basic material instance. You can click and drag it in here. That's one way that you can do it, or you can have it selected over here. And then let me open this up a little bit more so you can see this. You can hit this little arrow key and that will populate it with whatever's selected in the asset browser. So you see, I just changed it on the object level, and so now it updates through everything else in the world. Okay. And now, because we have that live, then let's take a look at this. So you can sit there and change colors all at the same time, right? We can do all that, which is cool. We can change the metallic value of it. So I'll put that to 1 over here. And then as we rotate around, you can see it's more shiny, right? And if we have metallic up with roughness, we'll put the roughness down to 0. It's like mirror or chrome, you know. So that's pretty cool. And this is what you're seeing with lumen reflections on here. So if we take this roughness and put it at 0.2, you can see that we get something that's got nice reflectivity to it, but it kind of blurs out the reflection and everything. Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to put this at, I'm going to go 0.45, put the metallic down to 0, and we've got our specular. Let's see if we put that at 1. You see it does brighten up just a little bit, but that default value is 0.5. Put a 0, it's going to kill all your specular. Okay, so we basically pushed all those controls that we made, and we made it to where we can tune this stuff live. Okay, so I'm going to hit save for that. If you need to save something, it's going to have this nice little asterisk on here. You just right click and say save. So we've been able to save those changes that we made. The next thing I want to show you is the power of these instances where, okay, we've got this material set, we like it, and let's say we want to make a duplicate of it, but we want to change some of the parameters on it. We can just take this material, right click on it, and duplicate it. And on this one, I'm going to call this one basic red, like this, and I'm going to get rid of that 1 at the end of it. Okay, and then I'm going to just assign it to this guy here and this guy here. So it's not going to look like anything's going and changing because we need to change some values on here. So let's go ahead and change this, and we'll make this, let's make it a nice red, just like that, like a pure red. So now we've got this, we'll hit save, okay. And so we change that. It's also possible for us to make an instance of an instance. This does get a little crazy and get going down the rabbit hole kind of thing. But basically, if you make an instance of an instance, then whatever changes you made to what is considered like its parent will get pushed down to all the siblings, and it works from here's our parent material. So if we ever need to make big changes to the material, we go back into this one, and this is where we add new parameters and stuff like that. So like, let's just say I make a thing for emissive color. I promote to parameter and go ahead and save that. Because I've added this new thing in the parent, we can take a look at the instances, and now we've got that as a new control in the instances in this one, and then also in this one, because these are children of that parent, right? But if you have an instance of an instance, then the instance in front of it becomes like its parent. So it inherits the changes going down the line, right? So it's actually very powerful, but if you're not careful, it could become a little bit confusing to look at. One thing about these emissive colors is I'm gonna change this just to like an orangish thing here. You can overdrive the values on this stuff, and then you can really crank this, and you can get this looking pretty wild for a material like that. Okay, and depending on the color of the object and the color of the emissive that you're setting on stuff, you can get some interesting combinations for that stuff. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and turn that off, hit save, just like that. And eventually we will make a material that's a bit more emissive like that. Okay, so that's a little bit about setting up materials. Let's start taking a look at making a clean new level. So we're going to go out of this level, and then we're going to start working with the parts and pieces that we imported in. So behind the scenes, to speed things up just a little bit, I went ahead and opened each one of these up into the static mesh window area, and then I took my material and I did the material instance, and I plugged it into the slot of each one of these, and then I just went here real quick, just grab this and hold down Shift, and then you can right click and you can say save, and you can save everything all at one time. So now all my parts and pieces have that material instance assigned to it, and we're ready to start building with things. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this down. Don't really need to see that anymore. And we're going to make a brand new level together, okay? So let's go up to File and say New Level. And you're going to see that you're going to be presented with a couple different options for this. Right now, we're just going to use this basic because I do want some lighting and everything else like that. So let's go ahead and hit Create. Make sure when you create this basic level, you actually have this basic icon selected, then hit create, and then go ahead and create that. I actually accidentally started building the other one that we see there with the mountains and everything. So this basic level is going to have a player start. It's going to, allow us to go in the world. It's got this big grid setup. It's got some volumetric clouds in here. We've got sky sphere. It's going to give us the outer part of the world. It's got some fog in here, sky atmosphere, and it's got a directional light. If we hit Control L, we can click and drag this. So hold on Control L and then move your left mouse around, and you can change the time of day. You can make it night. So it's a pretty interesting system. I'm going to leave it somewhere around there like that. Or you can hit undo and just leave it whatever the default was. It's up to you what you want to do. Okay, so I want to drag these cubes out and then start trying these. I'm going to check this player start and see where this is. I'm probably just going to move it back a little bit, like right here. You can see those blue arrows actually whenever the player spawns into the world. If we rotate this, that's the orientation that you're going to start from, like that. I'm going to hit undo. You can see now we're just going to be like front facing just like that. Hit escape. Okay, and we're going to try out our first trusty basic cube. Let's just drag it out into the world. You can see I have my grid snappings on, rotation and scale set to 10. And I'm just going to zero this stuff out, 0, 0, 0, and everything should work as expected, right? And if we've done things correctly, we should be able to move this up, and we should be able to move it up 50 units, and it sits directly on the floor. Okay, so that's working the way that we expected. Let's now do this cube double. And so again, we can just drag this out. We can try to get it roughly where it needs to be. It should snap to those grid increments for us. Then we could drag up like that. Okay, so that's working. Something else that we could do is if you hold on Alt and you can click and drag out, you can drag out a copy. And it's possible for us to replace this with another mesh. So like I can put it on this cube half in the content browser, and then this is actually selected here. I can right click on it and say replace selected actors with this cube half, and I'll do this static mesh like that. Okay, so that helps in times where you've already got something set in the world and you have the position where you want it to be, and you just want to swap that out like that. Do note though that it is not giving you the name. It's taking the name from what it used to be. So I'm not a fan of that. I'll just click this out like this and try to get that nice and moved up. And if you do remember, this one is going to be some odd values for us. So if I did 225, that's going to snap up to it. Now with our grid increments for snapping, we can put this to 5, and then we can do that. Obviously we can push it up to like 100, and you can just move it like that, and you know you're only moving 100 units. So if you need to get down to even pushing it to like one unit, you can do that. Okay, so I will push that back on 10 and see where I'm at with stuff. So I'll do this next one, this cube half arch, like this, get that close, and then go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees, push it over here like this, and then push it right here. So that's working pretty good for me. Now for this one, let's go ahead and just click and drag out this arch inner. Let's rotate that 90 degrees, sorry, 90, like that. And if you need, check this. I'm not a fan of this. I really wish these numbers were more accurate, but whatever. Sometimes you'll see these weird values that look like it should be 90, and it is. But you're going to see like huge decimal points on there. Yeah, not exactly sure why it's doing that, but it should be fine for you. Okay, so that one snaps up. If I do this side trim, this is the only one that was a little bit weird for the pivot point on this, and you can see if I move this right here and then here, actually the pivot point's in the back side of this, so I need to go 90 with that. I could snap that right there. That seems to work pretty good. I could hold down Alt, drag out a copy of this one here, and yeah, so why that's not matching up, obviously I've got this part here that is 25 units, so I'll just pull that down just so we can see what's going on with it. And then I've got this cube top, which is this is 25, and then if you remember what we made for this part, let's get this over here like this. And I'll tap F to frame in on it, and then just push up like that. And if I've made this correct, I should be able to add 2 of these, put this on 5, and actually I might pull that down to 1. Okay, and let's see. Trying to figure out what the value of that is going to need to be for this, because I do want to make sure that this is actually snapping up. So if we ever get into the situation where it's hard to see maybe what's going on with things and we needed like a side view, you can click this button here and that'll show us all the different like quad views, just like Maya, except for using spacebar to go in and out. You're gonna have to use these right here, so we can zoom in with the mouse wheel, and then now we can see the grid, and we can see that it's yeah, nice and clear for us. So I must have done something incorrect with the spacing of this, and that there we go. Yeah, so I was just overlapping those parts, and so I need to get this at I remember those values from Maya's 62.5, and then this one would be 87.5, like that. Once I get those values set, then I could go back to this grid snapping thing and start to work on getting that. So that's what I was telling you, is I didn't really want to use values like that. It just makes it a little bit more difficult to snap up. So it's not that they don't snap. We just have to remember some of those numeric values that we set for stuff. So I'm going to go and just push this over real quick. Let me put this at 10. Just so we can kind of see that it's actually working. Do something like that. I can select this, hold down Shift, and move this over here just like that. Okay, continuing on here, let's do the cube trim, and I'll just pull that out right about there. Rotate this 90, and we should be able to push this right back here. Go here. Push up. And the reason that I'm having so many problems with this is I've got the pivot point set in the center. Like you might not like this setup, but I'm trying to prepare for what's going to happen here pretty soon, where we'll get things set up and I want to reuse these parts. So if I sculpted something, I'm going to try to make it interesting on the, every side of this thing. So to maximize usage for this, I'm going to need to be able to easily flip and rotate this. So I know the translation part of this is kind of a pain for some of these values, but again, I'm setting the pivot because I'm trying to set it in the center, is because I'm trying to preempt some stuff that's going to happen later where I'm going to need to flip and rotate these things easily and not have to do too much with the actual position data. Because I've done another version earlier that I showed you that I worked on, and I had the pivot point off to the left and things like that, and it made it easy for snapping and moving in the world. But when it came time to flip and rotate these parts, it became more and more difficult. So that's why I'm showing you guys to do this thing in the center of the objects. So I know it probably feels a little counterintuitive right now at the stage that we're at, but yeah, a little later on when we get the sculpt stuff going, it'll actually make your life easier. So we're going to take a little pain on the front end, and that's to help save us some time on the back end. Okay, so let's just drag this one out here like this. So rotate it 90. Need to push this over right here, just like that. And that one snaps up too. Snaps up good. It looks like we're good here for that. Okay. So, yeah, suggesting that you do a first test and just test all the parts and pieces out. Again, this is going to be a complete and total personal decision of yours on how you want to set these pivot points up, but I would try to get that resolved now at this stage. Do a little bit of building with these parts and pieces. But again, if you want to help yourself out a little bit later for the being able to move and rotate the parts and pieces around, that's why I've got this thing set up in the center part. Okay. So now that we got this little test level made, I'm going to show you, let's save this, and I'm going to show you some options. So every time we open up Unreal, it'll go to that actual map. First, let's make a folder for ourselves so we can be organized. And we're going to right click in here and say new folder. And I'll call this maps, that right there. And then we're going to go and say save current level as. It's going to let us say, hey, where do you want to save this at? And let's go to that new maps folder that we made. And I'm just going to call this basic build map. Okay, like that. And I'll just hit save. And then what we can do is we can go to project settings right here under edit. We'll go to edit project settings, open that up. Let me pull this up here for us to take a look at. And then we are going to go to maps and modes right here. And you can see the default right now is set to that level, that third person map that opens up whenever you open up the project. So you can click and you can drag and you can go find your folder, basic build map. And I'm going to do this game default map, basic build map. Okay. You'll close this down, and it actually saves to the, there's an .ini file with your folder structure of Unreal. And if you remember, I'm gonna go to this and show you. When you first make your project, if you go to your documents area, there should be an Unreal projects folder unless you set it to some other location. And you can see that here's where this project sits. And config is this default editor ini. That's where it's saving some of the information. Like once you start changing settings for the project and stuff like that, that's actually changing that file right there for you. Okay, so let's just go ahead and hit save, and then we've at least got something that we can start working with, and so we can start building inside of the world. Okay, the next thing I'm going to show you is how we can start making some modular chunks out of our pieces that we've got inside of here. First thing I'm going to show you is how we can use groups inside of Unreal to make building a little bit easier. So if we hold on Shift and select these different parts and pieces that we've got here, you can hit Control G, just like a lot of other programs that are out there. And that will group things together. So now it's really easy for us to select this whole thing as a group. If we hold on Alt, we can click and we can drag this part and piece out like that. I haven't really talked to you about flipping things in here. So if you right click under something under transforms, you can see you can mirror axis uh, X, Y, or Z. And it looks like from what I'm looking at here, we need to do, nope, not mirror X. We need to do, let's try Y. Yeah, that'll flip that over there like that. And we should be able to push this and just snap this stuff up just like that. Um, let's see how far it's pushed over on here like there. So you can do that and you can keep groups and you can move groups like that. You can right click and you can say groups. You can say unlock. So if you, let's say you wanted to move some part of the group like this, it's possible that you could do that. And then you can go, you can see the group turns red, that outer part. We can say groups and we can say either remove from group, or we can lock the group back up and then you're back to that method of moving. Or we can say after we've moved it, we can ungroup everything and then we're back to working with just our normal parts and pieces that we've got like that. Okay, so that's groups. And I'm just gonna set these parts and pieces over off to the side for right now. Okay, and we do have this cube in the center. That's going to be a little bit important in just a bit, but I'm going to take these parts that we see here along with this, hold down Shift, and grab everything, and I should be able to move it. I do want to get that little part there. And I'm going to try to get that centered up just right there like that. And we'll leave, like I said, we'll leave this cube right in the center of the world, and that'll become more important a little bit later whenever we're going to harvest these parts as a blueprint. Let me move this thing out of the way real quick. Just get this down here. So it's up to you. See what you can do about making, you know, like an interesting shape out of things. I should be able to just duplicate this. Maybe move this up here like that. And then maybe I'll take this bigger part. So I'm going to right click and say ungroup. I'm going to select this part, hold on Alt, click and drag it up, and then rotate it 90, then just push it down, then push this over, and then hold down Alt and drag out a copy like that. Okay, and I do want my trim that we've got on here. Now, if we have set our parts and pieces up correctly, what we could also do with some of this stuff is you could start to manipulate the shapes. It doesn't really matter at this stage, scaling things like that won't be a problem, but whenever we actually have sculptural data on here, it does get a little bit weird if you start scaling things non-uniformly and like really stretching things, just because it'll change like what you've sculpted quite a bit. So I'm trying to go here. If you remember, we can tap F and we can use those Maya controls and hold down Alt and left click around here. So it's really up to you how you're going to navigate around. Let's go ahead and see what's the number for this. I'm going to need to do, I think, 187.5 like that. And what I want to do is I want to scale this thing non-uniformly. So I hit the space bar. And maybe I do something like this, and we'll do 0.25 for the number on there. And then looks like that thing just snapped right into place for me, so that looks pretty good. So here's what I was saying. Like, we scaled the thing quite a bit. If I had sculptural data on there, it's gonna maybe possibly look a little bit weird. So you gotta kind of see what you can kind of get away with for that, right? So I can hold down Alt and I can drag out a copy of this. And then maybe I put something in the center so you could do some design work like that. Or you could try to get just one of these in the center. And then if we scaled this all the way out let's see if I got that. Yeah, scale of 4. And then right now I'm moving on here, right there like that. And you can click and drag that, right? See that I can kind of just shift that over that way. And yeah, so it looks like the value 150 works pretty good for that. Now that I got that set, I can hold on Alt and I'll just click and I'll drag this over here like that. Okay. Again, up to you what you want to do design wise with this. I'm going to hold on Alt. I'm going to drag this out in front. I just wanted to see what it would look like if I had something like right above the archway of this. A little bit later, I'm going to show you how to do some things with their array tools in here, so you can add like a few blocks that just went around this arch, and it looks pretty cool. But maybe a little bit much for right now. I'm going to go and see about checking this in a different view here. So I'm going to go to this view right here. And that's not actually helping me because I'm seeing the back side of this. Okay, so like right now I'm in this front view, and if I need to see the other side, I can go to back like that. So that actually works rather well. So it looks like I'm able to snap it into the center like that. Okay, I'll just leave that. We can go ahead and click this, go back into here, just like that. And I think this looks pretty cool as far as a shape that we've got going on right now. I'll just move this stuff over temporarily, right there like that. Okay, so I'm going to show you now how we can select these parts and pieces, and we can harvest the parts, and we can turn this into a blueprint. So think of like a prefab thing. If we turn this into blueprints, it's really cool because with blueprints, it's not just meshes. You could add meshes, skeletal meshes. You could add lights to it and everything else like that. So it becomes this really powerful container. We can put logic on things, so you can add animation. It goes really, really deep. So it's very cool what we can end up doing with this stuff. Yeah, so I'm going to just select all the parts and the pieces like this. And before I do the harvesting of things, I want to move the whole thing and make sure everything I've got selected is actually working. Now, what could be useful is if you have things selected, you can create a new folder, and I'll call this door 1, right? So you can show and hide everything over here. That's just in the viewport for this. I do want to put this cube in there as well. So if you ever get in this situation where you can't see that folder you were on, you can right click and you can say move to, and I'll say door. So now that should be in this door right here. If you want to select all the parts and pieces of that, let's go. Sorry. Okay. You can right click on it and say select all descendants, and that will select everything in the group there. So that's pretty nice. So in order for us to make sure we've got a consistent pivot point that's in the center of the world, what we're going to do is parent all these pieces to this cube. So I definitely hate to stop the flow of the video, but I want to make sure that I point out a mistake that I made. I do fix it a little bit later, but it's could cause you some problems. So it's basically, we're talking about this pivot point. What I had was this sitting up 50 units here like this. So it used to sit right here and everything was on the floor, and this thing that I was using as a pivot had a value of 50 on it. So that was not good. So what I did was I unparented all the parts and pieces from that cube. I just click and drag it back into that group that we're going to make. And then we can take this cube, make sure that that's set to 0, 0, 0, and same for rotation. And then at that point, then take all your parts and pieces, then just click and drag that up to that. It's important to make sure that whatever we're using as the pivot point, that all these values are zeroed out on it. It works, but it's going to inherit that value. So I had to end up moving all my parts and pieces down by 50 units. So that's kind of defeating the purpose. So I just wanted to draw that to your attention, and I fixed that a little bit later. But if you do that right now, it's going to save you some headache. Okay, so all we got to do is select all the parts, and then we'll just drag it onto that cube basic, and you can see that it becomes the parent. And now we can select that cube basic, and we can move that thing around, and we can rotate this thing, and we got a consistent pivot point for us. Okay. All right, so let's select all the parts and pieces just like this. Actually, before I do this, I've done this a few times, so I actually want to keep this stuff around in case something happens. If I duplicate the hierarchy, it'll make a whole brand new one and just call it door 2, which is nice for us. I'll close this one up. I'll hide it. And I'm not a big fan of whenever it makes the duplicate, it moves it over ever so slightly. So I'll put this back to 0, and I'll put this to 0, just like that. Okay. So be careful with that. It'll move it on you if you're not paying attention. It's going to give you some problems. Okay. So again, I'm going to select all the parts and all the pieces, and we're going to go to the blueprints area right here, and we're going to say convert selection to blueprint class. Go ahead and click that, and we want to harvest the components, and then it's going to say, hey, where do you want to put this at? And I think, yeah, I can't do that there. I do want to put it in the stone blocks. I do want to go right here, stone blocks, and I really should have a new folder, and I'll call this blueprints, like that. Hit OK, and you can give it a name for yourself. So I'm just going to call this door VA for version A, and I like to put a number at the end of it. Just gives me some more options. So go ahead and select that, and it should harvest those components and put it all together. And actually what you see in the world now is actually this new blueprint that was created. Okay. Now, if we didn't do this cube thing, it'll build it, but the values for some weird reason are off on our pieces, and they don't snap up the way they are. So it's like super frustrating to be able to understand like what's going on with that. Okay, the next thing I'm going to show you is that everything is parented to this cube, and it gives us the pivot point that we're looking for. But the problem is, if we don't want that to be in the world and we don't want it to be visible, I mean, we can do a trick. There is if you type in viz for visibility, you could turn out this visibility, and you can make sure that it's not rendering in game. So let's see where it's under rendering. There we are. You could tell it not to be visible, and you could tell it to be hidden in game. So that's one way that you could handle that. I'd rather not do that. I'd rather have a group or like a null or something like that that has this thing parented to it. So if we do add, if we go here to the components, we can type in scene, and let's just do this utility scene, and you can see it'll make this new thing, and we can call this pivot. It shouldn't be parented to anything. If you scroll to the top, you should see everything should be zeroed out. Scale should be 1 by 1 by 1. Okay. I'm going to select some of these parts and pieces, and it looks like some of that's already sorry, I had done this behind the scenes already, so some of that was assigned to a scene thing. So I'm just going to push this all in pivot Let me get rid of this thing that was left over from a different session that I was doing behind the scenes. I'll grab all these parts and I'll just click and drag this into pivot. Okay, so now we got a new pivot for all those parts and pieces. That'll move everything around, right? But now we want this to be the root of everything. So if we click and we drag this on top here, you see what it says. It says drop here to make pivot the new root. Default root will be deleted. Let's go ahead and do that. So it should be good to go. And then we will need to take our cube. I don't really want that anymore. So I'll go ahead and just delete it. You did notice that the cube popped up like 50 units. It's because we had it move 50 units in the world, and then it, I don't know, transforms, whatever. It was taking that into consideration and account, right? So I'll hit compile, hit save, and let's close this down. And then now we should have a brand new thing that we can hold down Alt and we can drag and we can click and move parts and pieces on this. You can drag it out from here as well. So that's another possibility for you to do, and we can snap it up that way. But you might be going, okay, that was a lot of work, but what's the benefit of it? Like, why do I care about that? So I was telling you that these things become very powerful systems for you, where we can do things where I'm going to double click on it, go to this viewport section, zoom out so we can see what's up with this right here. These things are live. So anytime we take some change to the master blueprint, any of them that are placed in the world, it automatically updates them. So imagine you're on a team with people and you're building an environment, and you've used these blueprints all over, and as a team you make a decision. You're like, you know what would be really cool is if we had these a little bit higher up here like that. Let's just double these up. So I'm gonna hold on control and click in here, and for whatever reason the controls in here are a little bit different than in the world. Like normally you would hold on Alt and you click on and drag out a copy. It does not let you do that in here. You can hit Control D, that will duplicate your shapes. And then to select multiple things, you have to hold down Control and select them. So I don't know why it's set up the way that it is, but it is, and I just deal with it, right? So select this, hold down Control, and drag this down, just like that. And Escape does not deselect things either. So I can select itself like that. But you can see I'm making design choices now. It updates in the entire world. So again, in any environment, but especially in a team environment where you're trying to make changes and you want to have the team kind of adapt to those changes that you have, this is a really powerful system for you to be able to do things, right? So just like we did in the world, you can click and drag and you can parent things to things within here. And so then, that starts to move those 2 parts, right? For that, I already showed you how we can add a scene, which is basically like an empty kind of group, and it's just got values on there. Now, because we made this the root, you can't change the position or rotation of that root that we made. But if you wanted to have like all these kind of controls underneath of it, you could make a whole nother new scene node like this, right? Then we could assign everything to that. And I might just call this thing, I'll hit F2, transform node, something like that. It's up to you what do you want to call it, right? And then now take a look. Now we've got the ability to change the location of it. We could rotate these things, so that's how you can kind of get this set up. Again, it's super powerful. We could add there's lights that you can add in here. You can add other pieces of geometry within here. Let's just put this at 0. You can assign materials to things. So it's really like a bunch of different objects, which is, it really is. And you're able to, make this prefab kind of container thing that just has all this cool stuff in it right there like that. So I think it's going to open up a whole lot of possibilities for you, and you're going to be able to make cool design decisions about things, and you're going to be able to update that stuff very quickly. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of these two. Come back here. If you want to move the light around in here, you can hold down Control, or not Control L, just L, and then click and drag, and that will move the light around in here. So you might need that sometimes. Because it is a blueprint, when you get done, you should always compile, make sure that compiles correctly, and hit save, and then you're good to go. So what I'm suggesting for you is that you do this process, that you make a couple different doors, you make a couple different wall pieces, and you use those as blueprints, and you get that going, and you start to see how do these parts and pieces work together that you've built, how do they snap up, and this is where you really get to be like a designer, engineer, and start to really think about the design aspect of things, right? So it's I think it's pretty interesting, and it's pretty fun. So have some fun with that, build some parts and pieces. I think what I'll do is I'll put it in a time-lapse mode, and you can just see how I'm creating some stuff, but I've shown you all the necessary like technical parts of this to do this. So now it's just time for you to be creative. All right, now that we know how to make parts and pieces, and then we can start building that with blueprints, let's take a look at operating with the full pipeline, where we can update art inside of Maya, and then that can automatically update what we see here in the world. So we've got all the parts and pieces that are building these bigger chunks in our world. We've already taken a look at if we update a blueprint, it updates with all the different blueprints that are within the world. And now I'm going to show you how we can replace these objects with the next level of refinement, and it will auto-populate inside the world. So in order to do that, let's hop on over to Maya. So if you remember from the scene that we were looking at before, we set up this little animation on the timeline here, just so we could get everything to go from the center and then move out like that. Okay, so I'm going to put this down to 0 right here like this. I'm going to select the entire group that we had. We can click this little plus button to open that up if we want, and I'm just going to hit Control D. That's going to duplicate our work that we've got, and I'm going to call this Proxy L_2. And what we're going to do with these, we're going to start adding beveling to stuff. So we can select this whole entire group right here, just tap H that we've looked at before. So we shouldn't be able to select any of the parts and pieces because they're hidden in that group. And then now we can start working with these parts and pieces here. So something new that I want to show you is if you have a bunch of objects within Maya and you don't want to see all the other objects and you just want to focus on one thing that you're working on, you can hit Control 1, or you can come up here to Show, Isolate, Select, and you're actually turning on and off this View, Isolate, Selected. So it's a really powerful feature, and it works really well for things. Now we're going to hit F10, or we can right click on here and say edge, and we're going to select all of our edges and we're going to bevel the edges of this. So to get to the menu for this, we can hold down shift and we can right click, and you can see bevels right here, and we're going to do the option box for this and open that up right there like that. If you're a menu person, we need to go to edit mesh and we can go to bevel and we can get to it that way. So you got multiple ways that you can get to the tool set. I'm just going to reset the settings and just make sure I'm looking at exactly what you're looking at. We'll go ahead and hit apply. You can see that it's going to pull up this little menu for us. We can actually hover our cursor over any of these names on here, and you can just click and drag left and right, and it's going to interactively change the values of that. Now, if you hold down Control while you do this, it does the values, but it does them in lesser increments, so you get finer control over this stuff. So I think what I would like is a value of probably 0.1 for the bevel. That's a nice chunky bevel on there. If you wanted to do more segments, which we don't need to, I just want to show you what this looks like. So if we pull this up, we can do higher rounding. If I get in really close to this, if I'm smart about the way that I put the numbers in, you can see that with segments of 2, so it just puts a split right down the center. This would be nice for having an even number where I can break off this face, this face, this face. So we got a top, bottom, left, right, and front and back. And that's what these even numbers right there like that. Now we go to the next number up, and you can see this is uneven. I don't have a center split going through there, so I'd have to go up to 4. And now you can see, if you pay attention to the numbers, you can kind of help yourself out a little bit later when you're doing things like setting up UVs and stuff like that. So this is, some values that you might want to look at and use if you want to do rounding on here. Now you can take this depth and you can pull the depth down to 0, and you're adding the divisions, but you still get the bevel effect that we've got there. I'll put this up to 1 on here, and then I'll show you this. If I pull the segments down to this right here 2, and we say chamfer, I'm going to turn chamfer off. This is a little bit later when you get into more complex modeling. This is like holding your edges or triple edging method, and they use this in the film industry a lot. So you can actually do this. If I tap 3, we can turn on smooth mesh preview. So we're adding, like ZBrush would do, adding subdivision levels to the model. If you hit Control A, that's going to bring up the attribute editor. And if we tap F8 or right click on here and say object mode, what we're actually looking at and temporarily turning on and off is this smooth mesh preview. You can actually pump up the number of subdivisions on there, or you can lower them to the base cage, and this is 1 division. And you can see the shading gets a little better as it gets higher and higher in here. So again, when we tap 3, we're just interactively turning that on. If we tap 1, we're turning this on and off like that. Okay, so just we're not going to get too far into that as far as modeling, but if you're curious, that's what's going on with this stuff. Okay, so if I let go of this and I got rid of the controls for that bevel, if we are in the object mode here, go to the channel box. If you see over here under inputs, if we haven't deleted history and stuff, a lot of times the options for this stuff exist still over here. If I click this little button here, it is actually going to say last tool, use manipulator. It gives us that little menu back so we can start playing around with that. I'm just going to put the chamfer back on, and I want my segments to be like this. So I'll let you explore around with that and try that out, but this is what the values that I'm going to be using. And again, make things look just a little bit nicer. I got screen space animated occlusion on, and I do have multi-sample anti-aliasing on for that. Okay, so most of the time I'm going to tell you want to delete history. If you remember that, it's Alt-Shift-D, and that'll delete the history on things like that. I'm going to undo that, and it's possible if you're not doing anything too crazy with your stuff, you could leave this history on there, and you could always come back and you could change the values a little bit later. It does become a little bit more dicey whenever you start doing more things on top of these operations. So I do caution against that, but I'm going to go ahead and leave that. What I did want to show you, the other thing that's possible with this is, what if you wanted to select this node and just get rid of it? So if I copy the name of this and I come up here to this area and I click this select by name, I can just paste that in there, and then I'll actually select just that node, and I can hit delete on it, and you can see it's going to get rid of the poly bevel that's on there. So it's a little dicey. I really wish there was like a real stack modifier for this, and you can just get rid of certain things. If you're a Blender user, you're used to that. I think 3D Studio Max has that as well. That's not something that Maya has, but it's possible you can get to some of that stuff. Okay, I'm going to hit Control-1, and then we'll go out of that Isolate Select mode. And again, that's up here, Show, Isolate Select, View Selected. And if we did the time slider in there, we do not have any animation data on here. There is a way that we can get the animation data from the parts that we've already set onto here. All I need to do is I need to select this, hold down Shift, I'm going to select all the way down so I've got everything selected. If you double click in the time slider, you see those two little red marks, those are keyframes. You double click on there, it selects the entire timeline. You can right click, say copy, and then now I'm going to select in the same order that I did before. Select that top one, hold down Shift, double click in here like that, and then right click, say paste, and I'll paste those values. And now you can see we've copied the animation data on here like that. Yeah, so now we've got this to where we can see all the parts and pieces. It's a little bit easier to manage and work with. Now I'm going to do this one more time. I'm going to do this. I'm going to show you if we have this in object mode like this, it's possible to convert the entire selection of one thing to another. If you hold down Control and if I hit F9, that would convert my object into vertices. If I held down Control and hit F10, that would convert things into edges. Hold down Control, F11, it would convert these into faces like this. So I want all edges. I'll hit Control F10. Again, you can always just right click and say edge. I just wanted to show you sometimes it's to your advantage to turn one selection type into another. Like if I do this face and I hit Control F10, you can see I've converted that selection of faces, and maybe sometimes it's easier to select a few faces that you know is going to contain all the edges that you want, or same thing for vertices or something like that, right? Now, if you saw that, I'm going to hit undo. Because I'm converting verts into edges, these vertices touch all these edges, so that's why it's going to convert that like that. So if I wanted to just do these outer perimeter edges, I'll use a face like that. Okay, so let's do this again here. I'm going to select all these edges, Shift, right click, say bevel edge. I'm going to open up the option box for this thing again. I'll go ahead and hit apply. And what I want to do is get those numbers set on here, so then that way I can just move a little bit faster. So that was no, that's not 0.1. So I think this this fractional thing is based off of the size of the object, so that's going to be different each time. So if we wanted to do something where it was like absolute, let's see what it looks like for absolute, and you can see it's really, really small. Okay, so let's do a value of 2. Still not what I'm looking for. Let's go for, I just need to find what that number is that I'm going to be happy with everything. And it doesn't looks about where I'd want that to be. And I'll just do all the other options the same way as that. So again, like what we looked through and we went through, if you find the options that you want, and you could set this for your bevel options, and then that will hold every single time. To make sure I'm being consistent, I showed you how we could get rid of that, and the values are slightly different on that. So I'm going to hit apply, and then now you should see these things all line up, and they should vert snap to each other. So I'm using the same exact values on every single one. Now, if I go to my next object, so I'm just tapping F8 to go back and forth between component object mode. If we do G for our last tool, you can see it's going to automatically just apply that to the other parts and pieces. You do that. Let's see what that one gives us. That's cool. I wasn't sure if that was going to work exactly the way that I was hoping for. And on this one, what I want to do is something a little different. I am going to do that, but here's the deal. If we want this to actually feel like they join together in here, we would need to be a little bit more selective about this. We wouldn't want to bevel the top of this. To make things a little more clear and easy to work on, I'll hit Control-1 to do the isolate select thing. Again, right up here. You can go there if you want, if you're a menu person. Now take a look at this. If I do F10 or we right click on here and say Edge, I can select these just holding down Shift. And then now whenever I hit Apply, it will bevel just those edges and it'll leave the top. And then now I could hit Control-1 and bring this back. And now I could get this to sync up to this part up here. I could do the same thing with this one. I'll hold down, select this, hold down Shift. I can tap G for my last command, or we can just click this here, right there like that. You could do that right there. Okay, and I'll do this one here. So you're really in control of the design here. I'm just showing you options for what we could potentially do on this. All right. And I think for me, just for this example, I'm going to leave it like this. I like the look of that, and I like what's going on here with that. I'm going to go to this part in this piece here, hit Control-1, and then I'll take a look at this. And I just want to see if this makes sense to leave this little tiny part and piece down there. I guess it doesn't really bother me. We could merge the vertices on here. So we looked at the modeling toolkit where we can come up here and you can just say target weld. If we click on that, we could just click and drag that over like that, and then click and drag that over like that. So that'd be up to you. It's just a slight difference in visual. I think I will actually just go ahead and leave that right there like that. And then the last part will be this this piece up here, which will be a bit more difficult. Let's see how this goes for us on here. So on here, we want to bevel, obviously, these parts and pieces. We could just drag a marquee around this with the edges selected. And so we grab those edges pretty easily just by doing that. I'll hold down Shift. I'll add these edges here. And I was hoping that would select that as a loop, but because we don't have geometry that's supporting this, it's not going to like it. So I'm just going to hold down Shift and add these as a selection. Basically, I'm selecting everything except for these within through here. So that's the other thing. There's so many ways to get to the same result. Like I just did that. You might find it easier to just do this, and then hold down Shift and then deselect these. And again, we just got to the same result the same way. I'm going to hit apply on this and see what these values and see what it does. And it's giving us a pretty good chunk of the geometry, and then we're going to have some problems that we're going to need to clean up. So unfortunately, this does happen with the bevel tool if you're asking it to do a little bit too much on things. So I'm just going to take this vert right here, and then if we put on the move tool, hit W, or you can click here. If we hold down V, that turns on our vert snapping, and I could push this down to maybe right there. But see, that's well, I'll push it down here, and then I need to get this like back all the way to here, I suppose. Just because that edge continues here, and then it actually intersects with this thing right there. So I'm going to take this and hold down V, and that's not looking great for the geometry there. So let's do this. I think in this case I might do, let's see, target weld. I'm going to weld this up right here like that. I'm going to bring this to this point. These are really, really close to each other, but I need to just take this and snap it right there. And if I might need to pull this out a little bit just so I can get it away from that other part, and then I can snap that thing together. Okay, think that's working fairly well. And then now we need to do something similar down here, where I'm going to first move this. I'm going to hold down the move, and I'm going to use V to snap to this point right here. So you saw, like, after you hold down V and you start moving along that one axis, you can put your cursor anywhere you want and select it. Like, I just wanted to snap to that vert there. Hold down V and I can move it right there. So I just snap these things together. And sometimes it might be easier just to select like these verts that sit over the top of each other. Shift right click, say merge vertices to center, like that. So we just clean that up. Let's do the target weld on this one. We can just click and then drag down to here, like we just did previously. And then I'm going to drag this down to this point right there. I need to get in a little closer. And I'm going to do the same over there. Actually, I'm just going to clean up this one side, and we're going to mirror this stuff across. So I just want to take a look at it and see if everything makes sense for it right now. Okay, so you should see the pivot point that we had before was right in the center of the object. I'm going to show you the mirroring tool right now. So we can go and on object mode, shift right click and say mirror like this, and we can do the option box for that, so we can bring that up. And these are the options that I like to have. I like it to cut the geometry after it mirrors it across through the center. Now, if this is in the right spot in the world, like if I hit Control 1 and take a look at the grid down there, this is not right through the center like this on this x-axis. But if we are going to mirror it, we can mirror it across different axes, right? So we can do Z. So does this thing sit right down the center of the Z? Yep, it does. I want to keep this side of it, so I can say, hey, I want to mirror this, and I want the mirror direction to be, we can tell it to either be positive or negative. And the way you know that it's positive, you see these little like lines going up for Y. That's a positive Y going this direction. This direction is positive Z, and this is positive X. So I want to keep this side of it. This is the positive Z, so I'm going to mirror it negative, and I can hit apply on there. I tell it to combine with the original, and I do this merge threshold, and I want things to be really, really close, sitting on top of one another. If I do this automatic, I've had some problems with that before, so I do custom and then do a value of like 0.001. I hit apply, and you can see what it's done for us. So it's taken all the work that we did on that one side, and it's merged it together over here like that. And on this case, I will do delete the history. So that was Alt-Shift-D, and you can see it just got rid of all that history that we had on the mesh right there, like that. Okay, so we look like we've got the same thing. If we wanted to, if you don't want this geometry going down the center, you can double click that loop like that, and you can hit Control Backspace. If you just hit Backspace, let's take a look at what happens there. Looks like we got everything. Everything's cool. But if you hit F9 and you take a look at your verts, it leaves vertices around, so you might have to select everything and delete it. And if you forget, it could be problematic. When we hold on Control when we do Backspace, that's going to delete all the edges and then delete all the leftover vertices for us all at the same time. So that's actually a pretty nice feature that we have right there for that. So it's going to delete the history on that, and we are in that isolate mode. So let's go out of there, or we can hit Control 1, however you want to do it. And then now we've got all of our parts in our pieces. It looks pretty good. The only thing that I would say is this. The operations that we did, it changed the geometry quite a bit, where I think I'm going to take this edge, put on the move tool, hold down V, and then I'll snap right along here like that. Okay. And then same thing for this. We've got something here, and that's interesting. I've got a little stray vert right there like that. And I'm not able to delete it, so I'm going to have to take a look at this topology on here. Let's isolate this again. So this is good because it shows you, like, what are we going to do if we got to do some troubleshooting here. So if I pull this out, You can see we've just got this extra floating vert right there like that. Not that big of a deal. All we got to do is go to this right here, go to that target weld tool, and we should be able to weld that up there like that. I'm going to go back and just recreate the problem and leave it right there where it's at. One thing that I like to do to catch some of these problems is if I tap 3 to do the smooth mesh preview, I've been using that enough to where I start to know like roughly what these things look like when they start to smooth out the model. And then you might see some areas like this is expected. We've got a bunch of geometry that doesn't have any holding edges, or we haven't connected anything within through here. So that's going to have a big open spot, but then like it feels weird. Like we got this piece right here that's not flat. So that might be a clue that something's going on there, right? So sometimes I use that to my advantage to try to troubleshoot and make sure there's nothing wrong with the geometry and there's no like weird problems. So now when you tap 3, you see how that edge flows like this and like this. It was just some little visual cue for me to go and say, hey, I think something's not going right with this part and this piece right here. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to edge mode, just select this, put in the move tool, hold down V, and then snap right to this edge that we see here. And then now we're good to go on this, okay? So now we've just beveled all of our edges. We have our animation data on here like that. And then now we're ready and we can actually just export out all the parts and all the pieces. So we've got a proxy level 2. I might just add another little descriptor on here like this, just to make things a little more apparent for us. I'm going to use this for the name whenever we export out. So I'm just copying the name. So we got the whole folder selected. We can go File, Export Selection, and we need to navigate to where that sits. Okay, I found my location. What we exported out before was just proxy_L_1 group for a group. This one I'm adding just a little more descriptive information, proxy L2 bevel group, and I'll just say export selection on that. And then now let's hop on over to Unreal and take a look at how we can update the work inside of Unreal. Okay, here we are inside of Unreal, and let's take a look at being able to update all these parts and pieces and have them show up on our blueprints that we've already set up. So I already know that I can replace these. It's actually going to change these meshes because it's going to replace them. If I do want to keep around these first initial proxy objects that we set, what I'm going to need to do is go to the folder, and I'm going to say duplicate. So unfortunately in Unreal, they don't have a just right click and duplicate folder and everything that's in the folder. What we can do though is make a new folder, right click and say new folder. And I'm going to call this proxy_L_1. And I'm going to say _save like this. Okay. And then what I can do is I can take all the parts and all the pieces that exist within here, to select them, select this, hold down shift, select that, and then go and move it into here. So I'm going to click and drag it into the save folder. And instead of moving, I'll say copy. So now we've got copies of everything that we can just hold right there. And we'll go ahead and just right click, say save, And so we've saved these off, okay? Now we can go ahead and take all the parts and the pieces and we can update them, right? So we could do this one at a time. If we had individual files and we exported those out, you could right click on it and say re-import, and that will look for any changes that have been done to that file. They've got this nice tool in there that says re-import with a new file. So let's say you give it a whole new name and everything like that. You can update that and you can say re-import with this new file. You can also go and say open source location, and you can go and say, what does this look like in Windows Explorer? So you've got some options for those things. In our case, we put a group inside of Maya, and then we put all the parts and pieces in there, and we imported it all in one go. We can still update this, and we can update it with a new file. Because we're in Maya, and because we use the same exact names for things on here, it's going to take a look at the names when we import this in. It's going to say, hey, these things have the same name. Do you want to replace this with this new thing that you got? And so it's going to give us some options for that, which is nice. Okay, so we're just going to right click on here. We're going to say import into current folder. Let's go find our thing that we've made, and here's our thing that I gave it a name with bevel, and then the group. I'm going to go ahead and say open for this. I'm going to go to static mesh area, and then just put this on static mesh. And remember, we had the option on here to not combine the static meshes like that. And then this is what the options we've been using before. Now, I'm going to tell you a problem that's going to happen. It's going to re-import these in, and it's going to put the default material on there, and we're going to have to reassign materials for every single one of these again. So we don't have tons of parts and pieces. You can get that done pretty quick. But I am going to show you a little trick that I found that seems a bit odd, but this is the only way that you can get this done right now, and I do hope in the future that they fix Unreal and they make it very easy to replace materials on a bunch of objects with material. I did look into this on import time, like could you do that, and there's not really an option for this. So what we're going to do is go to materials, and normally we have this import materials turned off. We're going to turn it on this time, just checking textures. We have that off. So it's going to import a material for us. Let's go ahead and say import. So we get all the options we need. And it's saying, hey, do you want to overwrite these things because they get the same name? I'm going to say apply to all, and I'm going to say yes. And you can see it just imported everything in. You can see it imported, and now we've got all those parts and pieces have been automatically updated with our bevel on there. And now we've got this standard surface material from Maya. Okay, we need to replace the standard surface material with this material that we've already built. So I'm going to select it here. I'm going to go hold on Control and click on this materials folder, and you can see it's going to give us this selection here. So I'm going to select standard surface, hold on Control, and select this mbasic instance that we made. Right click on it and say Asset Actions, and we're going to say Replace References. It's going to give us this maybe some kind of warning or something. We can tell it like, hey, go ahead and we're gonna do our thing. Just go click that, gets rid of it. And it's wanting us to select the thing that we want to keep. So we want to keep this basic instance. So it's going to select that, keep that, and replace that on here. So I'm going to say consolidate assets, and you can see it's going to update that for us just like that. And then now we can go to all of our different shapes that we've got. See the asterisk that's on there. Select this, hold down Shift, select here, right click, and say save. And then now we've saved the options with that. Okay. All right. If we didn't do it this way, it would have been a real pain. We would have to go to each one of our blueprints. So let me save these real quick. We would have to load this up. Take a look at all the different parts and pieces that we had in here and select them one at a time. And we would have had to replace the static meshes with those new shapes that we made. So we'd have to go ahead and select that and then plug that in here. So it is important for you to know that, like you can change things on an individual level, but it's a lot of work, right? So I'm trying to show you some methods that would be a bit more automated on things like that. Okay. And just taking a look at this, I think I made a mistake on that one part that we talked about on here, and I pulled the verts down all the way down here. I think if I needed to update the pipeline, go back to Maya, I could just raise that up and snap that there. I think it would look more visually appealing if I just had that go straight across, so I could just vert snap these up to there. Okay, so there's a look at how we could update our parts and our pieces. We can get this to the next level, and we can build bevels on our parts. We can get the material that we had replaced out with a new material, and so everything's looking pretty good. All right, I think I've shown you quite a bit about how we can build parts and pieces. Now let's focus on the end of this section, a little bit about rendering, how to get our screenshots to look just a little bit nicer than what they currently do. So one of the first things that I did was actually went to our materials area, and I took this basic instance version that we had, and I duplicated that. So right click duplicate, and I called this floor instance. So I just went in here and changed the name of that. And if I double click on this and pull this off to the side, I'll just show you the changes that I made here. So the base color, I just put this down a bit lower than it was 0.182 before, right? And so now I put this at 0.075, darken it up a little bit. And then I put the roughness at 0.3. So it's giving us a darker floor, and it's giving us a nice little bit of sheen to it. All we got to do is click and drag it onto the floor, and we can go ahead and assign it that way. The next thing I was looking at is just the design of this area, and I was telling you that we do have to be a little bit careful about taking some of our shapes and scaling them too much. And if we do that, we can get some odd shapes kind of going. Like you can see how stretched out this bevel is and everything else like that. So I wasn't super thrilled with that. So I returned these back to a scale of 1 here. So let me hit Control B to go to this, double click this and open this up so I can show you what's going on here with that. So I'll go to the viewport area and then just navigate over here and select one of these. And you can see that the value of this is still, it's 1 by 1, and it's still that scale of 0.25. Now if I put this at 1, you can see how big that thing's going to be. I didn't really like the design of that, so I just left that there. Now with these things being this size, this is where I was saying this is getting a little bit tricky as far as the numbers that need to be on here. So let me put this at -50 just to make it look like a whole number here. But we've got some of these leftover values like going in this direction. So you can see this one was actually 212 and really just 212.5 like that. The next one over had to be 237.5. This one was 262.5. That's why I was saying about those numbers. If we use those earlier, it would get a little bit tricky. The other thing I'm not really the biggest fan of is that we have to take multiple objects and span it across. And so it's up to you. I'm giving you a framework that you work with, and if you guys want to change these parts and pieces, that's up to you to do that. So I might go back and actually change this to be really thick and wide going all the way across for that. And so that's a change that was done on there. Let's go ahead and save that. The other thing I said, I went back and I fixed up the snapping of this part right here to where it would go right at these verts right here and then there. And I think that produced a little bit better looking shape. So the other thing I was thinking of showing you is how we could build what's called an infinity wall. Right now this floor looks pretty good. We do see the sky back there. I'm not the biggest fan of that. So I was going to build a piece of geometry inside of Maya that will allow us to look like the only way to describe it is kind of like a skateboard ramp or something like that, like a half pipe. The wood for that if it was like built up in an arc, then we would get this really nice shading and we would have some mid-gray color back here behind there. So let's hop on over to Maya and let's take a look at that real quick. And to build this shape, I don't really need to see anything we've been working on before. I'll just select the group and just tap H to hide that. And let's go ahead and use our trusty cube. We'll click that. We got some no divisions in this right now. I'm going to go to the channel box, and then I'm just going to change this to all be 3 right there like that. And actually, I think 4 might be a better number for us. Because what I want is the bottom of this to be nice and flat, and we're going to scale this thing up huge inside of Unreal. So I'm going to tap F11, or you can right click on here and say face, grab those. Let's just grab the top here like that. And to deselect, we can hold down Control and then drag over this. So now we just got the top selected on there. If you ever want to see through the model, just tap 4 and we could just easily see anything that's selected. Let's hit delete, and now we got that. And now if we go and tap 3 for our, smooth mesh preview on there, we can see how this is going to kind of work out this way. So I'm going to tap 1 on there. I did want to see about taking this outer edge like this and moving it up a little bit. So if I tap 3 and then move that up, I can see what's going to happen with that. I still want to keep that thing nice and flat, so I'm a little bit concerned about that. And I think that'll work pretty good. I'll double click that, and I'll move that down a little bit, just like that. And I think if I hit F9 and select our verts, we could do something like this. Again, this is going to be really large in the world. And now I need to get this to sit on the floor. And if you remember what we did before, we should be able to raise that up 50 units, and it should sit directly on the floor. Again, my goal is to get a big chunk of this right in here to actually sit flat on the floor, and that'll be important. So if we tap 1, here's our base mesh. Tap 3, here's our smooth mesh preview. And in Maya, if you go to modify, convert, smooth mesh preview to polygons, we can actually convert that to actual geometry. When we do that, we can come over here to the outliner area and we can click on the divisions. If we wanted to put this down lower, we could do that. But I want plenty of divisions. Again, this is going to be scaled up really large. So I might actually put this on 3 divisions just like this. And then I will go ahead and delete history, Alt-Shift-D. I'll say modify freeze transformations, and I'll say modify reset transformations. So now we've got that sitting at the center of the world. Everything's frozen. The last thing we want to do, you see how it's dark within through here? In Unreal, if we put a one-sided material on there, we would only be able to see like the outside of this, and whatever's dark would be just transparent. You wouldn't see it. We can use that to our advantage, and what we will do for that is go select the model, say mesh display, and then we'll say reverse. So we're reversing our normals on our object. So now you can see it's going to shade dark out here, and it's going to be bright in here. So with a one-sided material, wherever it's dark would just be transparent. You'd see straight through it. So if we make that really big in our world and we just sit like within through here, we're going to get the shading that goes everywhere. Okay, I'm also going to change the name of this into Infinity Wall. Like this. I'll steal the name for this, and we could actually put this on a layer, and I'll just call this Infinity Wall underscore layer, like that. Save it, and again we could do the whole template reference and control the visibility of this. And I'm going to go ahead and change the scale, and I'll make this, let's go 10. So it looks pretty large, right? And if we bring back the visibility of our objects, that still won't even be that big in the world. It feels big when we scaled it up. Let's do 50 like that. And that's getting to be a better scale. If we think about like what we made with the building inside of there, we probably need more space. So we can even go to 100 like that. And then now I'm going to take that and freeze the transformations on it. So what's going on here is Maya's got clipping planes within their cameras, and it's supposed to maybe help optimize the the program for what it draws, but this just gets in the way. So if that happens to you, select your perspective camera, hit Control A, and when we got this far clip plane, we'll just extend that out like 2 zeros so it draws really far into the world, and that will take care of that that problem that we got there. Okay, so select this, and again, I'm going to say modify freeze transformations, and just freeze that like that. I will steal the name of this. Actually, I'm going to middle mouse drag it and put it up top here of all the other geometry. Steal the name, and we'll say File, Export Selection, do the option box, FBX, just like we did before. I'll just call this Infinity Wall. Okay, here we are inside of Unreal, and I went ahead and went under the meshes, made a new folder called Infinity Wall. Went in there, just right-clicked, import to current folder, found the Infinity Wall that we just exported out and imported that in. And when it comes in, it didn't have had the default material in there, so I had to take the material that we made for the floor, and I went ahead and plugged that in. You can see it's nice and shiny, which I was telling you I do like this gloss looking effect on the floor, but it's not really going to look so great when we put this Infinity Wall in here. So we could actually just take the floor, select it, and if we just hide the icon on it for right now just to see what's going on, and if we take the Infinity Wall and then we drag it into the world, let's just set this to 0, 0, 0 location for us, and that looks pretty cool. Now it's really got a really hot spot back in through here because of the highlights catching that curvature of that thing. And I was going to use the environmental height fog that they have within here to try to help out with that a little bit. So in order to get that going, if we take the environmental height fog, they have some values on here that was a little bit odd, so I just zeroed that whole thing out. And if you think about environmental height fog, if you thought like maybe like a cube or something like that that was in the world, and it's got this gradient, it's a little bit how it works, where it's really opaque at the bottom and then it just starts to get transparent as it goes towards the top. That has to do with this fog height fall off, and I set this to 2. I think the default is like 0.2, and that's going to change if it's a shallow fall off or it starts to get to be like a bigger fall off. So if I put this at 2, we can do that, and if I put this at 10, you can see we can really tell what's going on with things right now. Now if we put this height fall off at 0.2 like the default is, it just pretty much almost covers everything. Like we got to get in really close to see what's going on with stuff. So it is going to, take care of that problem that we had in the background, but we can't see anything in the foreground, right? They do have a start distance that you could start to play around with, and you could push this back to be like right past the edge of the building. I would say that that does feel a little bit odd to me, the way that it looks. You can use that to your advantage. Usually what I like to do is try to get this thing looking the way that I would hope for, and then I try to back these numbers off so I could ease this stuff off and try to find the right value that I'm looking for. Now this does have a place in the world too. I know we're not really looking at anything other than maybe there's like an icon that we can see right here, but other than that, you have to kind of imagine this volume with this gradient in your mind. And if you push this down like -500, not a huge effect. If we push this down 1000, let's see what that looks like. And if we push this down -6000 right there, you can see how it starts to lessen because we're at the top of that gradient and it's pushing it down in the world. So it's getting less and less opaque. We could go and put this at -10,000, and that's starting to work for us. Now we are starting to see that highlight come across there. So maybe we got to be a little bit careful about where that sits. And again, we're doing this because I don't like that highlight back there. I do like the sheen that's on the floor. This might not be the best way to kind of tackle this problem. A little bit later, I could show you in a shader how to make the top half of the shader a little bit different than the bottom half. It's kind of an easy fix. So we're just using this fog stuff as a little bit of a band-aid. Now I could take this start distance and again just push it back, maybe back and through here a little bit, and it's gonna kill some of this back here and still give us some sheen on the floor, which is what I'm hoping for. And if I need that to go away even more, I'm going to raise up that fog density. So, okay, we got something like that right in through there. My lighting probably looks a little bit different than yours because the other thing I did is I put a post-process node in here. So you can go to the VFX, go to post-process, and you can drag this into the world. Now, this does matter where it sits. This post-process volume is pretty small, and I put a 000 right there. And really that effect would only kind of work when you're in the volume. In order to make this fill the entire world, you can go to the post-process volume. You can go down towards the bottom, and let's see where it's at. Post-process volume settings. We're going to click on this infinite extend unbound, and then that way it just fills up the entire world for us. And we don't have to actually worry about what the scale of that volume is. Let's go to the top now. And the thing that I really want to do is I want to control the auto exposure. The auto exposure is this idea where if you're in a dark theater and your eyes get adjusted to that darkness and then you come out into the light, it takes your eyes a little while to adapt to that change. And it goes through this transition period. You've all probably experienced it at some point in your life. So they're trying to emulate that in the engine. It is a cool effect, but it does get in the way with understanding like what's happening with your lighting values. So in order to kind of take that off, I'm going to put this exposure and put this metering mode, set that to manual like this. I'm going to put this exposure compensation at 1. And we do have this apply physical camera exposure. If I turn that thing right here on, it's not what I want. So I want this on here. I turn this value off and it's giving me what I want at that point. I'm not sure where the directional light value of yours sits. Let's select that. The default of 10 seems to work pretty good for a daylight environment, but it is leaving our shadows looking a little bit dark, right? So the next thing I did for that is our fake bounce light. If we go to our skylight, and if we take a look at, I believe yours was on real-time capture like that, and you might have to change this intensity scale to something different. Let's see if I put this at 5. Let's put this even at 10, something like that. You see how we can really brighten up the shadows and make it feel like there's more bounce light happening in the world. Okay, so this is a stylistic choice. It's your choice artistically to say, like, how do you want to make this feel? So this is one way of doing it. If you take this real-time capture off and you take it and you put it, instead of SLS captured scene and having it work from the scene, you can actually say SLS specified cube map. And at that point, you've got a whole bunch of different things that you can choose from within this drop-down list. Now, each one, you can see this one's got more of a orange-yellow tint, and it has a pretty big effect on the color values. So you do have to be careful about it. Again, this is all like stylistic, artistic choice that you want to make. And so there's a list of different ones that you can go through on here. If they are darker, you might have to go through and actually change the values of these to be quite a bit higher. Like I might go 100 for something like that. One that I seem to like that I thought was pretty good for an outdoor environment is this Epic Quad Panorama. And you can see that one's quite a bit brighter, so I'll put that at a value of maybe 5, I think would be good. Let's go 10. I do like this idea that we're coming in here and it's just a little bit brighter and through there. The other thing I did was softened up these shadows on here just a little bit. So if we go to our directional light and then we go to this source angle and it's set to 5. If we put this at, let's see what the default is. We can reset that. You can see the shadows are pretty crisp on here, and to me it feels just a little bit too CG. In the real world, if something's close to that object for a shadow, that's going to be hard edged, and as it gets further away, it's going to be softer. So it never really softens up that much on some of this stuff. So I do like to maybe play around with this. If you put that value too high, I have noticed that it starts to do this kind of jittery thing. So I'm not a huge fan of that. If you had more complex materials on here and you had textures on there, you probably wouldn't see that as much. But because we're working with really clean materials and they're like perfect surfaces, that stuff shows up quite a bit. So I think a value of 5 gave me something that I thought was pretty decent for that. So that gets you in the range here for everything I'm showing you here. I did set up some bookmarks like we did before. So if you hold on Control 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to set some of those, I was just setting up some different angles and shots that we might like for this. And then the next thing I'm going to show you is how do we actually take high resolution screenshots. So if we hit F11, that will fill the entire screen. If you've got your Windows bar down below, you can hit Shift F11 and that will make it true full screen. It ignores the Windows toolbar down below, down here. You can't see mine, but if you see yours, you could probably see that go away. All right, so again, I was just making some different shots with camera bookmarks, and this is up to you, like how many shots you want to generate. This is probably my favorite one right now so far. And then to do the high resolution screenshot, for Unreal 5.6, they've actually changed the location where this sits, so you can go to this place for cameras. And I think they've tried to do a nice job of trying to organize everything that you need camera-wise all in one place. And you can do this high-resolution screenshots. Go ahead and open this up. Now, if we do a multiplier 1, I'm actually working on a monitor that's 3840 by 2560. I'm working full 4K. So that's a pretty good resolution to that right now. So if I do a screen size multiplier 1, that's the resolution that's going to get. And if you want to go higher for doing something like print, you could start to raise this number to 2, and that's going to double that number. And then if you do 3, it'll multiply by 3. You might want to be careful and just find out like your computer and how it reacts to even doing 2. And if it works on that one, bump it up to 3. And if you're really trying to go super high, I know I've used a value of 4 before, but you run the risk of potentially crashing the computer. So let's go ahead and click capture. And when it gets done, it will actually show you, hey, where did I save those files to? And it should show up right down here, right there. So you can click on that and it'll take you to the location of where that thing sits. So wherever your Unreal project sits, and mine's under documents, that's the default for that. So you can see documents, Unreal project, whatever the project is, there's a saved folder. And within there, there's screenshots in Windows Editor. And this is where you can find all your screenshots. So I'll just double click that and I'll load that up there. And you can see it's going to give us a nice big screenshot of this stuff right there like that, right? Okay, so there's that. You can stay within this window. You can tap, I'm just going to tap 2 for the next one. Go ahead and click capture like that. So go ahead and take some time and build some really nice shots to show off the work that you've made for this stage. And I'll see you in the next section. And in the next section, we're going to drive the proxy mesh even further. We're going to add some splits to things. We're going to add some aging to this, and we're going to all do it in the modeling. And then I'm going to start showing you a whole lot more options for Unreal for what we can do with our cameras and trying to set up some motion component with sequencer. I'm going to really do a much deeper dive with you on lighting and help you to understand how to set up more interesting and compelling lighting. We'll be using lighting together with that environmental height fog in ways where we'll start to build lighting and atmosphere together to make things feel a little more moody and just try to make things pretty interesting. So I know we packed in a lot for this first part, but just trying to get you familiar with the programs and all the different parts and pieces that we need to get everything kind of moving. And now that we got a base set, we got a foundation of things, and now it's just going to improve every single time that we touch anything. And we're going to just expand on our tool set and start doing some cool and interesting work. All right. Hope to see you in the next series.